township, that's it. The township email
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In compliance with NJSA 10:4, the Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this regular meeting of the Jackson Township Planning Board has been published and posted in all appropriate locations. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bressy? Mr. Bernstein? Mr. Herring? Mr. Haller? Mr. Riker?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Marzo? Mr. Tremor? Mr. Wall?
Here.
Dr. Campbell? Mr. Herman?
Here, thank you. May I please have a motion for the voucher for the recording secretary for tonight's meeting?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, minutes. We have the minutes from the November 20th, 2023 meeting. Any objections? I believe they were circulated earlier in the week, last week. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bressy? Mr. Bernstein? Mr. Haller? Mr. Tremor? Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Marzo? Mr. Wall? Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Herman?
Yes, thank you. Next, the minutes from the December 4th, 2023 meeting. Any objections? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bernstein? Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Riker?
Yes.
Mr. Tremor? Mr. Marzo? Mr. Wall? Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Herman?
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you.
We have two resolutions for tonight. Mr. R.
Resolution number 2023-31, resolution of the Planning Board of the Township of Jackson, County of Ocean, State of New Jersey, granting an amendment to its preliminary and final major site plan approval for Whitesville Commons Partners LLC, Block 22301, Lots 3 and 4. Eligible to vote, Mr. Bressy, Mr. Riker, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Marzo, Mr. Haller, Mr. Wall, Dr. Campbell, and Mr. Herman.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bressy? Mr. Riker?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Marzo? Mr. Haller? Mr. Wall? Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Herman?
Yes, thank you. And the second resolution?
Resolution number 2023-32, resolution of the Planning Board of the Township of Jackson, County of Ocean, State of New Jersey, granting preliminary and final major subdivision approval with required variances for a component of the Jackson Woods residential development for Jackson Woods Southeast Section 1, Block 4101, lots 20.001, 20.005, 20.010, 20.055, 20.151, 20.219, 20.319, 20.386, 20.466, 20.470. Eligible to vote. Mr. Herring, Mr. Sullivan, Dr. Campbell, Mr. Heller, and Mr. Riker.
Second.
Have a roll call, please.
Mr. Herring, I'm sorry, he's absent. Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Heller, I'm sorry, Mr. Heller,
Was I just noting the time for the,
7:07.
thank you.
Mr. Heller? Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Herring? Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
And Mr. Riker? Thank you.
Thank you. Engineering planning matters for tonight. We have two administrative approvals, Block 3101, Lot 11.01, Six Flags Great Adventures LLC. Mr. Klee.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Mr.
Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are applications for Great Adventure. There's two tonight. Historically, the board has considered these more of a informational item or an application just to keep the board and the town aware of what's going on at Great Adventure. There's two 2024 capital improvement projects. One is adjacent to the safari park, looking to establish 10 camping facilities in an area that, it's my understanding, has already been occupied by tents or sleepovers at the safari. This application really just, I'll say, upgrades the sleeping facilities that have already been established. There's also a truck loading station that's also proposed. We looked at that as accessory to the overall safari park. The other application involves installation of a new roller coaster. Again, just to keep the board, apprised of what's going on at Great Adventure, the new construction, and these are all 2024 capital improvement projects, which I said, like I had indicated, the board really historically treated this as more informational than anything. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Generally, our office doesn't have any comments about the administrative approvals. I'd ask Mr. Pfeffer to verify that these are in fact permitted uses in the zone, or that they have a zoning officer's permit, but generally speaking, the standard was if it was in a previously disturbed portion of the site, it was permitted use under the zone. It was sent here for an administrative approval. So we take no exception to either of the applications here this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Adam Pfeffer, attorney on behalf of the applicant. First, I just want to thank both the board and their professionals for streamlining this. As you heard, these are capital projects for 2024. They're going to try and get them done in time for the season come the summer. Historically, again, as your professionals indicated, we come before the board kind of just to show you everything. If you have any questions, Mr. Bressi knows the process much better than me, and I think anybody else in the room. This was set up a long time ago. Again, as they indicated, one is a new roller coaster. It's in a disturbed area already. We meet the setbacks and they're permitted. And as far as the camp tents, again, same thing. The permitted uses, previously disturbed areas, and they all meet the setbacks. I do have Mr. Maloney here, our engineer, who could answer any questions if the board wants, but that's the whole presentation.
You're not going to tell us how fast the roller coaster goes, how high it is, the kids watching. You're supposed to keep us filled in here. Come on.
Phil, listen, you gotta come and check it out for yourself. Once it's built, then you could, you can come back and report.
Sure, Mr. Riker.
The Environmental Commission is going to waive review because it's an existing developed property.
Great,
Okay, so for the record, no concern.
thank you.
Now, on the safari, new sleeping quarters, were the old sleeping quarters previously approved by this board?
I don't think any of the stuff was previously, it goes back many, many
And
years.
the original approval was sleeping quarters permitted, not permitted?
It's a permitted use in the zone, and they are using it already as sleeping quarters. This is an upgraded, new attraction.
It's like a new, so it was previously,
There were tents and sleeping quarters there now, and they're just trying to update it and add a new feature.
thank you, anybody else?
You have a bid there?
I have not. To the safari, yes, not to the sleeping quarters.
Is this like a glamping kind of
Yes.
thing? Okay.
Exactly.
Anybody else have any questions? No one else wants to know about how tall the roller coaster is going to be?
I want to know what the roller coaster's name is going to be, because I have a grandson in an engineering program doing roller coasters right now.
We can't divulge that information at this time.
You're not approved. Go ahead, get out of here.
I expect to be informed.
No problem.
Anyway, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make the motion.
I'm sorry.
Public.
Mr. Pfeffer, please step away. The public would like to ask you how tall the roller coaster is. Would anyone from the public like to come forward?
Seeing nobody approach the microphone, make a motion to close public.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to
I'd like to
approve.
make a motion, and once again, as always, they're never picked up by code enforcement or nobody. They come in ahead of time, they tell the township what they're doing, they give it to our professionals. I've witnessed this for all the years they're here, and they've never, ever tried to take a shortcut and get caught short. And with that, I make a motion to approve.
May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bressi?
Yes.
Mr. Bernstein? Yes. Mr. Herring? Mr. Heller? Yes. Mr. Riker?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Marzo? Mr. Tremor? Mr. Wall? Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Herman?
Yes, thank you.
Just for clarification, I believe the motion would have been for both there were two separate applications.
Yeah, they're the same block and lot number. I did
Yeah,
announce the
just
block
wanted to
and
make
lot,
sure.
so
Got 'em
Thank you
both.
so much.
thank you very much. Okay, for our, I guess we'll call it our first step. I'm sorry, before we go there, any legal matters for tonight?
Not at this time.
Any planning or engineering matters you should be aware of? No, thank you. Just as, for a board matter, just the schedule was circulated throughout the board, the proposed schedule for next year was circulated. Any comments, please reach out before reorg, so, it could be adjusted accordingly if possible. Thank you. For the first application for tonight, Block 222203, Lot 11, Whitesville Development, LLC. Mr. Klee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. An application for preliminary and final major site plan involving one 3-story, 21,000 square foot non-medical office building and one 2-story mixed-use building involving 31,000 square feet and 18,000 square feet of contractor's warehouse. Maybe some initial testimony from the applicant. There seems to be a discrepancy between the architectural drawings and the engineering drawings as far as the square footages that are specifically proposed. So some testimony to the applicant, so we all know what the square footage involved are. We have identified 3 variances from the industrial zoning requirements, testimony from the applicant in support of those variances. We had also called off some variance relief which may be required from 244-152 relating to bulk storage. I think the applicant does not feel those conditions or restrictions apply, so some testimony from the applicant in conjunction with those variance or that variance relief which is requested. Environmentally, any testimony, or I'm sorry, any comments that have been received from the Environmental Commission should be indicated, and the applicant has provided a letter of interpretation. I'm sorry, he is going to have to provide a letter of interpretation from DEP because the site is impacted by the conservation overlay zone. If the site's going to connect to public water and sewer, we should have some discussions as far as site utilization and proposed operations. The applicant has provided a traffic impact analysis, so some testimony regarding the conclusions of that study. We've also received some comments from the Bureau of Traffic Safety, so the applicant should indicate if they're going to be able to comply with all those requirements. It's on a county road, so access is controlled or reviewed by the county planning board. The applicant should indicate the loading zones on the plan. We see some striping that appears to indicate loading zones, but they should be specifically delineated. The applicant will require a design waiver for deficient parking. 160 stalls are required, and 127 are indicated. There is a vehicle storage area to the rear of the site where they're proposing some bulk storage, and it's not really clear if those parking spaces are to count for the deficiency, and if they are, they should be curb and pavement provided. We take no exception to the grading, and we provided some technical comments to the engineer. The applicant has provided a lighting and landscaping plan, which we take no exception with, as far as we can confirm that it's compliant with ordinance standards. The applicant should review the architectural consideration with the board, and I'm running out of gas, so anything else, I'll fill in later.
We will circle back. Thank you. Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our office has a report dated December 11th of this year. Mr. Klee did cover some of the use issues that came about from both of our initial reviews of the project. Properties in the I or industrial zone. I think the applicant should take a moment just to go through each of the buildings, each of the uses, how it comports with the industrial zone, and the standards that are set forth in the ordinance for the industrial zone, as well as for outdoor storage. When we get to that point, maybe we'll take a few seconds and make sure that we're all on the same page, so that, in fact, we understand what the variance relief may or may not be, and to make sure, quite frankly, that they can still be heard before this board. I don't know if that's going to be a problem. I don't think it's going to be a problem, but I think we need to go through the industrial zone standards to make sure we have an understanding of what's being proposed and how it comports with the permitted uses in the zone. After that, it is a fairly straightforward site plan, and we have some technical comments in there, and we'd ask the board to address those as well. The applicant to address those as well. Thank you.
Mr. Alfieri.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Salvatore Alfieri, Cleary, Giacobbe, Alfieri, and Jacobs on behalf of the applicant. Just by way of brief introduction, because your professionals gave a more thorough introduction. We're here under the industrial zone, which is section of the ordinance 244-63. There are multiple areas that we would potentially fall into, but when Mr. Borden provides his testimony, I believe he will be clear that we do meet all of the use requirements of the ordinance and that we are before the appropriate board. Otherwise, we're prepared to address all of the technical comments contained in the various reports that the board professionals have issued. And we're going to ask that Mr. Borden be sworn in. He's our planner, and he'll give you a broad overview of the site and then get into a little more detail about the zoning and some particulars of the project. Mr. Borden?
Thank you for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony, information, questions, or comments you present will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name, spell your last, and your credentials, please.
Sure. Ian Borden, President of Professional Design Services, Lakewood, New Jersey. I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. Been testifying and working in the state for 40 years, and testified in front of this board on
Thank
many
you. We
occasions.
accept your planning credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Mr. Borden, we're going to be referring, I assume, are you going to refer to the exhibit?
I am.
Did you hand these out in
I did.
advance? Okay, fine.
Each
So-
of the board members has the exhibits. We've provided 4 exhibits. Exhibit number 1 is on the screen now. First, I'll go through the site, describe the site, where it's located, the environmental conditions of the site, and then we'll jump right into the uses and how our project complies with the industrial zone permitted uses. First, we have A1 on the screen. That's an aerial photograph. North is oriented to the top of the page. This aerial was taken only on September 6th of 2023. The Whitesville Road runs north and south along near the left side of the page. We have the site outlined in red. The site is currently developed with, and has been for more than 40 years, with an existing commercial building in the front left of the northwest corner, a house in the southwest corner, basically a chicken coop structure, and the rear of the site's been cleared for many years. The site's been in this condition for quite a few years. We're proposing to redevelop the site. As far as the environmental condition of the site does not contain any freshwater wetlands or buffers. It was noted by the professionals, pardon my friend, my voice is a little cold. Noted that the property is within a conservation overlay zone, but there is no wetlands on the property. It was recommended by the board professionals that we obtain a letter of interpretation for absence of wetlands, and we agreed to do that. There are no flood hazard areas on the property. There is a Category 1 buffer that does overlap the northwest corner of the property. That will factor into the conversation about the 3 variances that Mr. Klee had noted about one of our proposed buildings. The surrounding zones are all industrial. On the east side of Whitesville Road is entirely industrial, to the sides and rear. To the west side is all PM1. That's Pinelands Manufacturing 1, the industrial zone in Pinelands. The property does contain 5 acres, where 2 acres is required. The property also meets all of the dimensional requirements of depth, width, frontage, so the property fully conforms with the industrial zone. What we are proposing, if you go to A2, please, Anthony, what we are proposing is to redevelop the site.
Could you identify A2 before you do that?
Yes, A2 is the site plan that's in the set of plans. There we go. So we have a standalone office building. That building is located in the same footprint as that existing commercial building. And then we have a proposed office contract or a contractor or office shop warehouse building. There were questions on the building area. Let me clarify those. The site plan and the architectural plan do not agree 100%. The difference is less than 400 square feet, but the architectural plans have the correct square footages. So what we're proposing is the 3-story office building in the northwest corner is 26,000 square feet in 3 stories. The contractor office shop warehouse has a warehouse shop area of 31,000 square feet and an office area of 5,000 square feet in a mezzanine office. So the total is, I'm sorry, it's 21,000 in the front. I think I spoke wrong. So the total is 26,000 square feet of office and 31,000 square feet of shop. The site plan. I'm sorry? Yes, the total office area is 26,000 square feet.
And that's made up of 21,000 for the separate building and 5,000 in the contractor?
That is correct.
Okay.
I've had a great voice all day. I sit here and I lose my voice.
It's the pressure.
No, not at all. There's no pressure. I think I yelled too much today. I don't know.
Ernie, you have that? Is that? Okay, thanks.
So speaking of the uses, there are 3 uses under the industrial zone, actually 4 that we're seeking to utilize. Under A1 of the zone, it permits contractors' office, showroom, garage, warehouse, and shop. That use does require that materials be stored within the building. But what that use does is, that use allows us, the office building, all of the office use that we're proposing is limited to use by a contractor.
Or multiple contractors?
Or multiple. I should have noted, the proposed office shop warehouse building is 9, I'll get that into the parking, but that has 9 proposed tenants. Could be less, it would not be more. Secondly, permitted in the industrial zone under item 6 is warehousing or storage of goods and products with 3 conditions that we will comply with. First is that no goods will be sold retail from the site. There'll be no retail sales from the site. B, all items again are stored within a completely enclosed building. And C, we're not permitted to warehouse or store hazardous chemicals. There is item 9, which is very similar to item 1. It's almost the same use to me, but I listed it just to be comprehensive, and that is contractors or craftsman shop or equipment storage area, including general repair shop, except that automobile dismantling and cannibalizing is not permitted. And then we have, I didn't mention at the rear of the site, we have an outdoor storage area. And the outdoor storage area is permitted under item 16 of the ordinance, where the ordinance permits the wholesale building supply yards, which doesn't apply, but this applies, the yards of contractors in the construction and building trades and similar operations requiring bulk storage of materials and equipment, such as building construction supplies and the equipment, vehicles, and supplies of heavy equipment contractors. So it's under item 16 that we are permitted to have the outdoor storage. And the outdoor storage is limited to the rear of the property. There is 4 performance standards in the industrial zone that we should discuss quickly. We don't trigger any of them, but just to make sure the record's complete. Each use in the industrial zone shall provide a truck loading and unloading facilities on the same lot and is not permitted in the front yard. We will propose our loading for the office contractor warehousing building in the rear of the site in the outdoor storage area. There's no loading in the pavement access drives. In our opinion, we do not require a loading zone for the office use because typically those are office supplies delivered by UPS truck. Number 2, which is similar to 1, but it simply states that the required off-street loading areas cannot be closer than 100 feet to Whitesville Road, and we are not. Item 3 states where the industrial zone abuts a residential zone, there shall be provided a 100-foot buffer. There are no residential zones surrounding the property, and thereby we are not required to provide a buffer. There is a residential use on Lot 12 to our south, but that residential use is in an industrial zone. So it does not require a buffer because the ordinance specifically calls to the zone, not the use. That residential use is a non-conforming use in the industrial zone. Actually, there's more. Item 4 states that the Any improvements in industrial zone should be served by a public sewage disposal system, or alternately, a septic disposal system that meets the local codes. There is a 12-inch existing sewer line in Whitesville Road. We do hope to connect to it. As I'm sure the board recalls, there is capacity issues with some of this sewer in this central sewer service area. So alternately, if necessary, and we hope it's not necessary, but it's certainly a satisfactory alternative, is to provide a sewage disposal system. So if we're not permitted to connect to the sewage system, we would provide a septic disposal system in accordance with the appropriate codes. All industrial, and number 5 is all industrial activities or processes shall take place within a completely enclosed building. We have no proposed industrial activities or processes. We're not proposing manufacturing or any industrial activity or process. Item 6 is also not applicable. It states that industrial parks are permitted in the industrial zone for large properties over 20 acres. Obviously, we're 5 acres. We're not proposing an industrial park. And lastly, under these performance standards, no use shall be conducted in such a way so as to discharge any treated or untreated industrial waste. We're not proposing any industrial waste for this project. The statement of operations that was provided to the board contains the hours of operation, which are typically 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday, although hours for contractors to return to the site may extend to 8 p.m. seasonally. In the site plan, we do propose, quickly talking about the site plan, the engineer, Graham, will testify to the stormwater, but as a segue to that, we have a single access road and to John, who's going to give the traffic testimony. We have a single access drive. It's centrally located to connect to Whitesville Road. We are proposing 159 parking spaces, 159 parking spaces are required. We are proposing 165, so we do comply with the parking requirements. We have 130 for the office uses, 21 for the warehouse uses. The ordinance also requires one space for each, additional space for each tenant, which is 9, so that's 9. And we are proposing 165 spaces. 9 of those 165 spaces are in front of the overhead doors. Those are the shaded overhead doors. There's 9 of those, 1 for each tenant. And we normally include those for this type of use because those spaces are the spaces to provide the 1 space per building, or 1 space per tenant. We do have, Mr. Klee had noticed, we have 28 spaces in the rear storage area. The rear storage area is proposed to be constructed with compacted pavement millings. It's not a full pavement that the parking lot and access drive is, but we believe it's adequate for the use of the storage. And those parking spaces would be reserved for the employees that are utilizing, not the office employees, but the employees that are utilizing the shop and warehouse and the outdoor storage. So and I'll get into design waivers shortly, but we would be asking for design waivers for those 28 spaces only of the pavement specification and curbing. But I'll address that in the.
Is there going to be lighting?
Yes.
Back there? Okay.
Sorry. Those areas would be lit in accordance with the ordinance. The plan does provide 5 ADA spaces. It was noted by the planner that we do require 6, so we will provide the additional ADA space. We will show 7 of the parking spaces to be EV spaces, EV-ready spaces, as required. And in fact, providing the 2-to-1 credit for those EV-ready spaces brings our parking proposed up to 169, again, where 159 is proposed. So we have 10 more spaces than required by the ordinance.
159 is required.
That's correct. Okay. The parking lot layout and access drive have been approved by the District 2 Township Fire official. So he has reviewed this and approved the layout. To complete the zoning, we have an impervious coverage proposed to the site of 74.6%. where the maximum permitted is 75%. The professionals have asked us to provide calculations of that, and we would certainly do that as part of any approval condition. The proposed building coverage is 17.5%, where the maximum permitted is 40%, so we're substantially under in the building coverage. The maximum permitted building height in the industrial zone is 50 feet. The proposed office building is 45 feet to the flat roof. And the warehouse building is 24 feet to the flat roof. I know it's always a question, and it's noted in the engineers and planners letters about solar panels. We will recommend to our client to ask their tenants to provide solar panels. We are proposing a ground sign right in the front, next to the access drive along Whitesville Road. That ground sign is permitted in the industrial zone, and it will fully comply with the ordinance as far as height, setback, area, and landscape requirements. The sign has an area of 24 square feet, height is 6 feet, and we will landscape it in accordance with the ordinance as requested by the professionals. A refuse enclosure will be provided for both buildings. That will be provided in the rear where the storage area meets the parking, so it will be accessed from the storage area. That enclosure will meet all of the requirements of the ordinance as far as masonry walls having a height of 5 feet, landscaping. The refuse enclosure will not be visible from Whitesville Road, and the refuse enclosure will be screened landscape in accordance with the ordinance. I did discuss the sewer. As far as the water goes, there is an existing 12-inch water main in Whitesville Road, so the site will be serviced by public water. I did discuss the sewer. As far as the water, public water will not be used for irrigation of any landscaped areas. An individual well will be dug to provide irrigation. We do not typically use public water for irrigation. We are proposing lighting in the site with pole-mounted LED light fixtures 20 feet high. We do not propose any lighting to the rear of the warehouse building, nor to the front-facing Whitesville Road. The 28 spaces in the rear will be illuminated. No light spillage will occur, especially on Lot 12. Even though it's a non-conforming use, we're considerate of the neighbor. And that's why, we tried to keep that part of the site very quiet. We have the back of the building there with no activity, no lighting. We did provide landscaping with street trees, shade trees, evergreen trees along Lot 12. We exceeded the ordinance with some evergreen trees. The house on Lot 12 is up in the front here, so we provided some landscape or evergreen trees in that area. We do need to provide, as pointed out by the board professionals, we will agree to provide the complete side yard landscaping with the unbroken landscape strip, as well as additional shrubs within the end islands and divider strips. We do have a review from the Township Forester, and we will comply with all the requirements of that letter. Nothing substantive was raised, in my opinion. The entire site, including parking, lighting, landscaping, and stormwater management, will be owned and operated by the property owner. The property will comply with, as far as all the ordinance requirements for the stormwater management, as far as the deed restriction and the agreement that's typically entered into for the maintenance of the system by the property owner. And otherwise, we will conform with all of the technical requirements of the board professionals.
Ian, before you discuss the variances, you indicated there's a single-family house on this lot. That is an existing nonconformity that would be eliminated if this were approved?
Yes, I'm sorry, I skipped over that. Yes, that would be just demolished as part of this project. The nonconformity would be eliminated. So we have 3 C variances that, in my opinion, qualify as C1 variances, and they're all for the office building in the northwest corner. Again, we're forced under the environmental regulations of the state to redevelop that building in the existing footprint. So the front setback along Whitesville Road is required to be 100 feet. The existing building is 41.8 feet. A 30-foot side setback is required. The existing building is 10.2 feet from the northern property line. And lastly, industrial zone requires a 75-foot combined side yard setback, and we are proposing 41.21 feet. The side setback for the warehouse building complies with the minimum setback of 30 feet, but the 30 combined with the 10 for the existing setback on the north is 41.21, where 75 feet combined is required, and that is also required because of the existing building. In my opinion, we qualify for the C1 hardship variance by reasons of the exceptional shape and environmental constraints of the property, the fact that this is an existing building, that the environmental regulations require us to develop in the existing footprint. The planner's letter in particular pointed out a couple of other items that I want to go over. There was questions in the letter whether variances are required or not, and I want to go over each one of those quickly. Item 4 in the planner's letter was, does the project meet the impervious coverage? The letter acknowledges that we meet the impervious coverage. Again, it's 74.6%, where 75% is provided, and the calculations are requested, which I had already agreed to provide. So no variance is being sought for impervious coverage. The question also on the number of parking spaces. As I testified, we do meet the number of parking spaces, and we will meet the number of parking spaces. We are asking for the waiver, which I'll get into in a few minutes, for the rear 28 spaces. But I don't, in my opinion, if the waiver is granted, there's still parking spaces. If the waiver is not granted, obviously we'll improve the spaces to the required pavement and curbing of the ordinance. Item 6 I already testified to. It was regarding the ADA spaces. We agreed to provide the extra space. And then the last 3 items, we get into signage. The question is the wall signage. If you could, Anthony, go to A3, please. We're permitted one wall sign on each building.
Just identify A3,
Yes.
please.
A3 is, and A4. A3 is the sheet 1 of the architectural plan that was submitted. This is the front view of the office building. It's a colored rendering in the view from Whitesville Road. And A4, which we'll get into in a moment, is the front view, first sheet for the office contractor warehouse building. But the question was raised in the letter was, you're permitted to have one wall sign. And what we have is, and the letter questions whether we have 2 and whether a variance is required for 2. In my opinion, we are not providing 2 because we have one sign here, which is simply the address oriented perpendicular to the ground, 427 Whitesville. That's all that is. And then there's another sign location for the business name. So in my opinion, the street address does not count as a wall sign. That's my opinion. If you disagree, either you grant the variance or I remove the street address. I think it's, in any event, good to have a street address on a building. Similarly, on A4, Anthony, if you don't mind. The comment was we have 10 signs where 1 is permitted. In this case, we have Gross on the building. Gross is a landscape contractor. That is the primary tenant of the property. They're an existing landscape maintenance firm located in Lakewood. And that sign, singular sign, does comply with the wall signage. However, if you zoom in, you'll see numbers at each doorway. There's 9 doors, and they just simply, the architect put a number at each door, just an identifying number. In my opinion, the number at the door does not count against the wall sign. That's my opinion. Just to give you some numbers on it, the grass sign is 48 square feet, where 80 square feet is permitted. So it's much smaller than permitted, and I don't believe the numbers count against the wall sign requirement. Excuse me. And last, before the design waivers, there was questions raised in the engineer's review about a particular ordinance section, 244-152. It's entitled bulk storage. The bulk storage section only applies in those zones where bulk storage is permitted as an accessory use. There's quite a few zones in town, like the LM zone, for example, light manufacturing, where bulk storage is permitted as an accessory use. And there's a whole series of performance standards for that. But industrial zone is the only zone in town that permits outdoor storage as a principal use under the item 16 of the ordinance I testified to. So the 244-152 does not apply. Lastly, in my testimony, we have the design waivers. I've identified 3. Excuse me. First is item 240, or section 244-197J. If you go back to item sheet A2, please, Anthony. And this is a common one the board sees quite frequently, that states that no parking is permitted along major circulation drives within the site. In our case, we have, again, our centrally located access drive, and we have 42 spaces along that drive. We have along the front of the warehouse building, plus some across the drive aisle there. So only 42 of the 169 are on that access drive. All are located more than 100 feet from Whitesville Road. So I believe it would be impractical, given the narrow shape of the property, to comply with that, and we believe that there's no, John Ray can testify a little bit more about that from a traffic perspective. And then lastly, we have the 2 that we've already discussed, which is the under 244-197, the off-street parking standards, the fact that we're not proposing curbing, nor a standard pavement thickness for the 28 spaces behind the warehouse building. As I said, we are proposing compacted pavement millings, which we believe is satisfactory to that. Mr. McFarland can provide testimony to that if you desire. But those are our 3 requested waivers. And that completes my testimony.
That's all we have of Mr. Borden, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Could you just help us clarify? You brought a few permitted uses in the zone, 1 and 16.
I can't hear you.
Sorry, if you could just help the board understand, or me understand, really. Number 1 in the zone, what's permitted is a contractor warehouse, which is permitted without outdoor storage. Number 16 is a contractor use, which is permitted with outdoor storage.
Correct.
So I'm just really trying to understand what the zone calls for. Are there contradictions in the zone? Am I not understanding something?
I'm not sure there isn't a contradiction, which is why we asked the applicant to come here and provide testimony. But it is clear in 244-63A16 that yards of contractors in the construction and building trades and similar operations requiring bulk storage of materials and equipment, such as building construction supplies and the equipment, vehicles, and supplies of heavy equipment contractors, is a permitted use. So to the extent that that section of the ordinance, 16 lines down, decided to say that it is a permitted use, I would have to think trumps 244-63A1, which says contractor's office, showroom, storage, garage, warehouse, and shop provided, however, all materials and equipment are stored within a completely enclosed building.
So, Mr. Borden, are you utilizing number 1, or are you utilizing number 16?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
For the office,
For the office.
building.
Even though, Ms. Peters,
Because we're permitted to have offices for contractors.
I
so that's
understand,
where
but
one
if
is
1 and
relevant.
16 are a contradiction, one of them, they both can't be right.
Well, no, I think I agree with Mr. Peters. I think absolutely both can be right. And in my opinion, reading the ordinance, and especially when you read the ordinance in the context of all the other zones in town, as the board is very familiar with, there's quite a few zones in town that permit the item 1, which is the contractor office, showroom, garage, and warehouse. That type of use is permitted in the highway commercial zone, I believe in the neighborhood commercial zone.
I think the point the chairman's making
But,
is
well, let
provision
me
there.
finish.
There's
Let me
a
finish.
specific
But the
provision
point
that says
is,
no outdoor storage, though.
the point is, that's right, but what we're dealing with here is the industrial zone. And typically, industrial zones provide for more intense uses than other zones. That's basically the purpose of an industrial zone. And for that reason, that's why 16, in my opinion, was added. Because it is the only zone in town that permits outdoor storage as a principal permitted use.
I understand what it says in number 16, but in number 1, it says you're not allowed to have any outdoor storage as part of a contractor warehouse,
Right.
which you're proposing. Number 16 says contractors could store goods outside.
But we're not,
question is 1
and we
16
fully
contradiction?
comply with that because we're not proposing any outdoor storage associated with the building. We have no outdoor storage in the front and the side with this building, or outdoor storage for the yard of the contractor is located at the rear of the site as a separate use.
So the separate use is for the contractor in the back, and a different contractor could only...
It could be the same contractor. Grass, for example, the landscape contractor, our primary client here, they're not going to occupy the entire site, but they're going to have their offices here, have their shop and warehouse in these spaces, and their outdoor storage of their equipment, material, and supplies for their contractor business in the rear of the site.
Mr. Shea, do you see 1 and 16 being a contradiction?
I see 4 different permitted uses on this property simultaneously being conducted, and apparently there's, okay, so from what I understand is that you're basically saying there's 4 principal uses on this property.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Maybe if you can just take each one of the 4, walk down on the plan and just say, here is this, here is that, here is this, and why.
That's
Because
fine.
Each one of these uses has different restrictions in the codes themselves. So you may want to just identify, hey, this portion, we can only do this, it's going to be restricted to this.
I understand.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Thank you, Mr. Shea. So we have, again, under 244-63A1, we have the contractor's office, showroom, garage, and warehouse and shop. And that is the contractor's office, standalone office building, which is the northwest building of 21,000 square feet. And we have the warehouse shop building and office of 5,000 square foot mezzanine with 31,000 square feet of shop and
I
warehouse.
apologize. Can we stop? The 3-story office building,
Yes,
what's the use of that building?
that is for contractors' offices,
Okay,
limited to contractors' offices.
that's it.
That's it.
No showrooms, no garages, no warehouses, no
That's
shops,
correct.
no outdoor storage?
There's no outdoor storage, there's no use there. Everything is in that enclosed building, and that would be contractors' offices only.
Can you explain to me what type of, just
Well-
maybe a definition of what type of contractor, what type, if I do accounting for contractors, and my contractors...
Well, I mean, let's use as an example the primary contractor, Grass Landscaping. That would be their primary principal office.
And that has administrative functions, et cetera.
Right.
That one would have for office space for a contractor's business.
It would-
So just clear for the record, again, I'm just trying to clarify the record. Clear for the record is you have to be a contractor which provides service, and it could be your administrative office. You can't
Only for a
provide-
contractor.
Correct, meaning if I provide a service to a contractor, I provide a phone system, I do engineering for a contractor, that wouldn't-
Business and professional offices are not permitted.
Got it, so meaning, so it has to, so it's clearly restricted to a
Contractor's
contractor
office,
who does work, who employs subcontractors to,
right?
thank you.
Again, with the second building, we have no outdoor storage proposed as part of that building. Everything is inside under the item 1, and that would apply to item 6 as well, which is the warehousing or storage of goods and products, which is a bit of a repeat of 1, emphasis on the warehousing with the 3 conditions: no retail sales, all items will be stored. There'll be no outdoor storage at this building in the front or the rear. Otherwise, it's surrounded by parking.
So that's not limited to contractors, sorry. Just for clarification, meaning that's number 6, so that would not be limited to contractors only.
Correct. You could do just warehousing there, but it's everything inside the building. And then,
Hang on, so go back to the main long building, right? So what codes are we, what permitted uses are we identifying that structure as?
that's permitted to have the contractor's office, showroom, garage, warehouse, and shop,
Which is 63-1.
That's 1.
as well as just straight warehousing under 6.
That's what I'm saying, so we're identifying that as both.
Yes.
But you're not
Again,
li-
no material stored outdoors, no retail sales, no storage of hazardous chemicals permitted.
So you're not limiting it to contractors, you're using really 6, you don't need 1 anymore.
That could just be a warehousing for anybody.
Straight 6, we don't need 1 anymore.
Correct. But not an office for just anyone.
I understand, so we have a 1 and we have a 6.
All right, may I ask a question? So the 3-story building,
Yes.
is that tied to the warehousing buildings? Would somebody that's renting that 3-story building
Yes.
have to have
Yes.
also use? So
Yes.
that would be something that would be a restriction?
I believe so, but arguably, it could be a contractor's office that does not rent shop or warehouse. We certainly expect that they would be connected.
I would think that would clarify things a little, because that would mean that some separate entity could not just float in there.
I understand.
And use it as an office.
And that makes
So-
sense.
So would, Mr. Shea, could we make that a condition, that anyone who is using that particular building would have to be also using the other building?
I understand.
That way, we would not be faced with people just renting a small office.
I understand.
And that, because that's a parking issue too, so,
I understand.
thank you.
So
And then,
the applicant is willing to limit the use of the office to be a tenant of the, we'll call it building number 2?
well, again, because the use is contractor, office, shop, warehouse, and garage, so I think Dr. Campbell's point is you can't have an office without having the shop, warehouse, garage, and I would agree with that.
Okay,
And then, if you don't mind, Jeff, if I could just wrap this up,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. And then lastly, we have the item 16, which is the yards of contractors in the construction and building trades requiring bulk storage of materials and equipment, and that would be the rear of the site. And that's the only area where outdoor storage would be permitted. Thank you. Sorry, Jeff. Yeah.
Okay. It seems to me the right way to present this is to have a comprehensive statement of operations, which is obviously missing.
Well, no, Jeff, all these were listed in the statement of operation.
I'm confused. So are you testifying that if somebody wanted to come in and rent that back lot, like the cable company, and put, 50 vans there, they could?
Yes.
If they had no other interest in any office or any other thing on that property?
Yes.
So if they're renting that space and there's no office or whatnot, what are the facilities for someone that shows up there who's working, who's going to park their car, hop in a cable truck? By the way, they had 2 cups of coffee and they got to take a leak. There's nothing there to service that. It's a dirt lot.
Well, I'm sure if such a tenant existed, my client would make accommodations for them with access to some of the tenant space for that
What's that?
purpose.
Would they have access to that 3-story building?
I'm sure they, or the shop warehouse. There'll be
Or
restroom
shop,
facilities.
warehouse, there'll be bathrooms.
There will be restrooms in there.
That would have to be, again,
This is not very clear.
So according to let me just clarify. If provision 1 did not exist and only 16 existed,
Yes.
would you be permitted to build that office?
If item 1 did not exist,
Yeah.
we could not build office, that's correct.
Okay. Is it fair to say that the contractor that's being described in number 1 is different than 16? Or else
No.
we could have dropped
No.
16, or else we could have just dropped 16 and included outdoor storage in provision 1? Meaning whoever wrote these ordinances, why wasn't
Well-
it specifically forbade outdoor storage in item 1 and permitted it in item 16?
I don't think any of us can question how the ordinance was written. It was written back in the early 80s. But in my opinion, as I testified, in my opinion, if you look at the common language in this zone and other zones, like the LM and the HC zone, there's common language in the uses like the office, the contractor office, showroom, garage, and warehouse, which exists in other zones.
But it's
So
not
they
vague.
started with that, and then as they worked down the list of uses that they wanted to use for industrial, they said, you know what? In my opinion, industrial zone is the highest intense use typically, so we should permit outdoor storage in the industrial zone where it's not permitted
So
any
why
other zone.
Why forbid it in item 1? It's not vague, it's specifically forbidden.
Because they were copying the section from other ordinance
So whoever
sections.
wrote it, instead of writing a proper ordinance, just copied and pasted?
Yes.
And whatever firm was supposed to write it, and, a lot of the ordinance just copies and pastes and...
But again, this was written in the early 70s, so.
But again, it's a contradiction, so I would just assume, to settle the contradiction, that item 1 is talking about a different type of contractor than item 16. Meaning item 16 is talking about, and it even lists in the ordinance. If we go to item 16, it's a little bit more specific in the type of contractor we're referring to. Wholesale building material supply yards.
Yes,
Okay, yards of contractors in the construction and building trades.
yes, but that doesn't apply to the other uses permitted, like warehousing, shops, garages, and offices.
But it sounds like it's referring to a very specific use that I'm just trying to
It
nail
is.
down. It's not that, you can't tell me that he's going to have an office there and a yard there because he's a contractor, office, showroom, and
Sure I
garage.
can.
And
I have multiple permitted uses in the zone.
Mr. Peters.
I can do multiple permitted uses in the zone. I think we're absolutely compliant with the intent and purpose of the industrial zone.
Are you comfortable that it's not a contradiction? And it was a copy and paste
Am I
error?
comfortable? What I'll tell you is I don't disagree with Mr. Borden about the ordinance having a contradiction and it being somewhat outdated. After that, it's up to you guys. That's what you all get the big bucks for. There's an ordinance, these words have
But
been here, and
if it's compliant, confusing though it may be, if it's compliant, does this body have the right to avoid the ordinances as they're written and have been used since the 80s?
Right.
That's my concern.
I mean, I have primarily a landscape contractor seeking to come to Jackson, to move their business into Jackson. They're a successful, functioning company. They cut the grass at my office. And what we're proposing is completely consistent with their operations and the ordinance. Their office, their shop, their warehouse, and their outdoor contractor storage.
Well, let me ask you this. You're saying that you have a landscaper, but no hazardous materials.
That's correct.
So the landscaper is not going to bring any landscaping equipment in there? No fertilizers?
Well, that's not hazardous materials. I mean, if it's applied on your lawn, it's not a hazardous material.
Really? You want to take a couple different fertilizers and we'll go play with it in the
I
parking
can,
lot?
I
and
can
you tell
walk
me it's
into
not
Home Depot and
hazardous?
play with a bag of fertilizer. That's not a hazardous material.
It is, actually.
Okay, well, I disagree.
So again, so do we have, I'm reading through the ordinance, do we have a right as a board to interpret an ordinance the way?
So our board, the whole planning board is a planning function. So we have to look at the ordinances and interpret it as written. Sometimes they're vague. What's that?
Microphone.
So our board is a board of planning function, all right? Sometimes the ordinances are vague, sometimes they're ambiguous, and it's our job to determine how we look at that. In this situation, we have 4 different principal uses, some of them contradicting the other, and I think the applicant's done a great job of identifying which ones overlap and where each one is located at. I've got a couple more questions, but it's a convoluted application in the sense that there's 4 different overlapping principal uses. That is the board's function. They take a look at the ordinances and they interpret it based upon what's written on the paper, and sometimes they're contradictory, sometimes it's gray, but it's the board's job to make that decision, right, wrong, or indifferent. So they have 3 variances here, you know, nothing earth-shattering, but there are 3 variances. And there's a lot of overlapping uses on the property itself. So that's what you're working with here. Just one more thing, the outside storage area, right? That is simply going to be regulated by 16, right?
Yes.
And now, is that, the outside storage area, is that going to be linked to the contractor and regular warehouse? So like somebody will be able to come in and maybe just get into a contract with the property owner to then just use the outside storage area, or are they going to have to be one of the contractors or, you know, somebody?
I think that's a less clear connection than what Dr. Campbell made for the office.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, is it, how convoluted are we working with?
But I could understand the bridge, because
Yeah.
the contractor term is common element.
So let me just maybe just take a step back. So we have over here an ordinance which you said was in place for about 50 years?
At least.
Okay. And we have a very clear contradiction in the order, you know, between 1 and 16 in what they're referring to. I'm sure somebody, I'm surprised that nobody over 50 years picked up on a mistake. If it was a mistake in the ordinance, you know, I'm sure somebody over a 50-year period of reading it, and professionals that get paid a lot of the big bucks to read it, you know, would have picked up on the contradiction between 1 and 16. I think my personal opinion is that the most plausible the most plausible explanation is that item 1 and item 16 are talking about two different type of professionals. One is a professional a little bit more clearly articulated in item 16. Right? Or item 16 is a little bit more articulate in the type of professional it's referring to. And item 1 is very vague. It's a contractor warehouse garage. I believe this board has struggled over the last.
I would argue that if you look at the existing development patterns in the industrial zone, down off of Faraday, in that part of the zone south of us, there is a number, and we've represented a couple, but there's many that pre-exist even us, that are contractor, office, shop, warehouse uses that have outdoor storage.
I think
There is quite a few. There's a sweeping company down there that's been there for at least 40 years, and they have outdoor storage of their equipment, their sweepers, and
Mr.
they have their
Chairman?
offices and their shop.
I
So,
think just Dr. Campbell has something to add. But
So would this perhaps be a better opportunity for the zoning board to look at this particular issue, since it seems to be almost beyond our ability to consider it, given that we see these inconsistencies. So would it be a more appropriate venue for the zoning board to consider this application?
Well, two things. First, under municipal land use law, there is a specific provision where a zoning board can interpret an ordinance. But we also believe this board has the power to make that same interpretation, if you feel like you can.
I mean, honestly, I'm going through my head and other clients we have in the industrial zone. The questions that you're raising, what we're proposing is consistent with the development pattern in the industrial zone for 40 years. Mr. Chairman, you're seeking to make almost every use in the industrial park a non-conforming use.
again, I have no problem with use number 1. I have no
You're-
problem with use number
you're-
16.
But you're digging this concept of the contradiction I simply disagree with, and it's not consistent with all the approvals granted for 50 years in the industrial zone.
For 50 years, nobody saw a mistake in the ordinance.
Well,
Mr. Aguirre.
that's one opinion, it's not my opinion.
Ian, I agree with you with Faraday. I'm familiar with Sweeping Corporation of America. Meadowbrook has got the same thing back there. I agree with you. It seems to me that we're vacillating, in my opinion, or it's what I'm trying to grab, and I know where this is going. I agree with you on this because I've seen it there in other uses. My clear and concise question is, that rear parcel, I don't care if they're in the office, I don't care if they're somewhere in that warehouse contractor space. In my opinion, that rear yard should be associated to something, some operation in that parcel. I'm not comfortable with it being rented out to a dumpster company, a crane company, whatever.
And I think we've agreed to.
That cannot be governed,
I understand.
okay?
And I think we've agreed to that.
Okay, so with that being stated, I do agree with you, Sweeping Corporation, Meadowbrook, Watts Electric, they're all consistent in that lost and forgotten industrial park. I can't think of what that was called. So I agree with you on that. So would your testimony be that you're going to put it on record that that rear space, that storage space to the furthest part of that parcel has a tentacle to either a tenant or an office oversight, and it's not going to be rented to someone outside that domicile property?
Yes, we agree.
Okay. There we go.
Thanks, Jeff, for breaking that down like that. I agree with you. I don't look at this as a conflict of the ordinances and batting people apart 50 years ago. I think it's more of an overlap where over the years they tried to adjust ordinances so they can expand on the original ordinance and use it in the proper way. And with that stipulation that there's only be people that are there already can use it, I would definitely concur with you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Are we arguing venue right now? And is that the board's job? I mean.
That's the question, right? That's what we're trying to figure out.
So before we really waste, I don't invest another moment in this application, can we rectify venue from a legal perspective and be done with it, one way or the other? Because I think you have planning board members acting as attorneys essentially, or being asked to act as attorneys interpreting venue. Why are we doing that? That's what I don't understand. So could we just,
You're not,
hold on just a second. I'm sorry. So to me, can we answer that question so we can carry on with this application, move on to the next applications, and then be done with it, before we're talking about ingress, egress, or anything else?
Right. It's a complicated issue, and the issue becomes is, does the planning board, at least from the gist of what I'm getting here, does the planning board have the authority and the right to request an interpretation from zoning officer as to whether or not there's an appropriate use or not? Now, it happens extremely infrequently. They can do that. I'm not recommending it one way or another, but do they have the ability to do that? Possibly. Now, before we go down that route, maybe we want to have the applicant bring in a professional statement of operations expert, some additional expert testimony to maybe put a little bit more testimony on the record as to that.
to answer Mr. Wall's comment a little differently, you're not acting as attorneys making a legal decision, but the fundamental question is, are we at the right board? And if you interpret the ordinance to say that all of these uses are principal uses, then we're at the right board. If you feel that they're not, then we're not at the right board. So we have to overcome that fundamental question, Mr. Wall.
The only follow-on would be, why wasn't that buttoned up before we started the meeting tonight?
It was,
If I could answer.
It's been in a review for 2 weeks. This application was proffered to the zoning officer and the planning board, kept it at the planning board. It's where it needs to be right now.
Okay.
We've asked the applicant to provide testimony to convince the board that they don't need a use variance, which would change the venue. I think they're in the midst of doing that, and we've come across this inconsistent portion of our ordinance, one of which is number 1, which is the exact same wording that's located in many other zones in town, and then a subsequent number 16, which appears to have been added later, that specifically says that the yard of contractors in the construction and building trades is a permitted use. So later in the creation of this ordinance over the decades, there was some more specificity to it. So it was brought out. All applications start with our zoning officer. It came through the planning board. So unfortunately, you folks are stuck with the making sure that this is the right venue. I'm not sure there was anyone else to ask this question of once the zoning officer left it at the planning board.
The point of the question, too, for the developer, the applicant as well, is that if there's an objector, there's not a complaint on venue after the fact, after you invest all your time and energy and professionals, that to the extent that it could be buttoned up, that would be, I think, a good thing to do. If it's impossible, it's impossible, but I think it would be good.
So the issue we have before the board is the zoning officer already technically ruled on what board it should be in front of, right, when we're talking about venue. Now, whether or not the zoning officer was able to look at the grayness and ambiguity of this different story, but none of us here, are inside of the minds of the zoning officer when they took a look at it. Now, the planning board itself has the application in front of it. So technically, you have to look at the application as is. Now, depending on whether or not they believe in the application, the grayness of it, the ambiguity of it, the variances of it, and all of that is up for the board's decision. But when it comes down to the zoning officer rendering a determination as to venue, technically the zoning officer already has. Now, you know, are there infrequent circumstances where the board goes back and requests? Yes, but with that being said, it's extremely infrequent.
So if we look upon this as a mixed use and consider the two different buildings as almost separate entities, each complies within its own area. Is that what we're saying? So we don't have to really be concerned. We can say, this ordinance complies to this building, this ordinance complies to this building, and we've discussed having restrictions on each of those two buildings to make it a whole entity.
To connect them, yes, I
To
agree.
connect them.
I agree with you.
So in that manner, we've done our due diligence
In my opinion, yes.
in pressing these divergent issues into making it one. We want to encourage, we don't want to discourage. We're not here to discourage.
I actually have a good rateable here. I can't believe it. Do I come back with a non-rateable?
But, you know, we're happy to encourage. We just want to make sure we're doing it the right way.
I understand. And I fully agree with what you and Mr. Riker said about the connectivity. I think that, in my opinion, is the way this should be addressed, and that does address the different section of the ordinance.
And I have to concur with Dr. Campbell. And also to say, I mean, it's not articulately written probably, and perhaps someday should be looked at and rewritten, but we have to deal with what we have, and this is what we have, and you've done a good job of presenting an application that works its way through that ordinance.
Mr. Chair, regarding what Dr. Campbell said about combining, I guess, the offices with the warehouse in terms of using the office space for the contractors as well. So two things with that. First of all, does the board have the power to enforce something like that as a condition? Second of all, there's 12 offices in the office building and there's 9 contractor warehouses. So how's that going to work?
All of them don't necessarily need outdoor storage, so
Sorry?
that's how it would work.
I believe you agreed to Dr. Campbell that everybody in the office will have storage.
No.
The other way around.
Other way around.
But we don't want separate offices. I mean, you can set those offices up in any way. You can make it not.
But in the warehouse building, you can have a small plumber who has no outdoor storage, who's just using it as a flex space type of thing. So that they don't need to use the outdoor storage.
Right. The link is from the outdoor storage would require tenancy in the building, as Mr. Riker is concerned. On the site. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes it a little easier.
So again, so just to clarify, so every office is going to have tenancy somewhere else on the site
Well, they have to be a contractor tied to a shop, warehouse, garage.
and tied to somewhere else on the site or?
Tied to the building,
Tied to the site, so.
tied to the warehouse building.
Correct, so or the outdoor storage.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Now, your reading of the ordinance, you're required to tie everyone together, or someone could come, I believe.
I don't believe it's required to tie them together, but I think from our conversations, that's a good solution to solve the conflation of the language, and I think that's fine, in my opinion.
All right, so just a quick dashing recap. We've agreed, or we agree globally, that who's ever in that back lot has a presence, whether it's in the 9 storage units or one of the 12 offices, and out of those 9 storage units, 9 goes into the 12. The others, I don't think it really matters if it's another landscaper that has nothing to do with grass.
Understand.
Or whatever. It's, as long as it fits the contractor description, it ships, it's good, it's done, it's over, period. And in my opinion, the ambiguous last ordinance was probably an attempt to try to perfect something that was going on in a previous application, like Sweeping Corporation of America.
Yes.
All those back there in that lost industrial park. I don't think it has anything to really do with the other two buildings, period.
Okay.
Oh, just I want to concur with our distinguished environmental commissioner, that as long as there's the tie in there and that there is a site connection, I think that that's sufficient enough for the ordinance and for a approval.
Can we go on to the ins and the outs of the project now?
Whoever has a question.
Mr. Alfieri, unfortunately, you're presenting a project that's on Whitesville Road, and the last warehouse that was on an existing property, that person took us for a ride. And I'm going to admonish your applicant, because if they're going to come before this board, they need to clean up that property, and it should have been done somewhat a couple months ago. It is a dump. You can get rid of the trailers, you can get rid of the crap that's on the ground, and that should have been done long before you guys showed up. It's really not your problem to take the beating, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say the last warehouse that appeared before us at the end of White Road, at Whitesville Road, they gave us a song and a dance, and long story short, they shoved it up on us, and they got their approval, and guess what? It's still the same pathetic dump. Okay, so what I would suggest to your applicant is start cleaning up. I don't know if you're going to get an approval tonight, but start cleaning up, because it's been that way for years.
We will definitely pass that message along loud and clear.
Moving along real quick, because we got a lot of stuff ahead of us. I'd like to see where you're going to put the septic if you had to locate it, theoretically. I understand why the front building is skewed, but I have difficulty with that front building because there are no other buildings that are 40 feet off of Whitesville Road. I'm big on linear frontages, and we are redeveloping Whitesville Road and County Line, and one of my goals, I'll be clear with you, I want to see everything lined up, looking pretty, looking even. And yeah, the other thing is, if they do widen,
The 530.
to dualize Whitesville Road, which we need, I don't know where they're going to get the land. So I have difficulty with that front building. I know you're in a bind, you're applying for the hardship variance, but I'm just uncomfortable with that building being that close up front. And the other thing is, there's no fire access to it on literally two sides. So, I have issues with that building in its existence, period. The other thing is, if you were pushed to pave that employee parking, which I believe it should be paved, your impervious coverage is just a fraction, under 75%, and that's going to bump you over. That's going to require another variance. So we're in the category, as Mr. Fleming used to say, too much stuff in a 5-pound bag. So
Let me address each of those, Mr. Riker, if you don't mind. The septic, if required, would be in the front of the building, right along the access road. Recall, this building is set back 100 feet. On to your third question next, which is the parking. That is already counted as impervious. As I mentioned, as I testified, we are proposing compacted pavement millings.
okay.
So denying the waiver and making me put in full pavement and curb has no effect on my impervious coverage.
Okay. Would you be willing to pave that?
It's, if the waiver is denied, we would have to pave it.
Okay.
We're already, in my opinion, we are paving it because we're proposing compacted pavement millings. I mean, or we're splitting hairs, but
Paving's paving.
I understand. But the point is that whether it's compacted pavement millings or the new pavement spec per the township ordinance, in either event, it's already counted as impervious coverage.
Okay,
So, and then,
ask the left-handed question. If you were to offer to pave it, would you offer to pave it?
Sure.
And maybe we might waive it, you know, and accept it.
I think I would love to pave those office parking spaces.
Those were the words I think I wanted to hear.
So how stuck are we with that 40 feet? I
Well,
mean,
that is
I understand you need to use that footprint, but that footprint is in the wrong place. We will never be able to widen that road.
Oh, well, I disagree with that. Going to that point, we are proposing, the design half width, the design pavement width of Whitesville Road per the county master plan. The design pavement width of Whitesville Road per the county master plan is 50 feet of pavement. So we are proposing, the shaded area that you see on A2 is our pavement widening to our 25-foot half section. So we're complying 100% with the future pavement of Whitesville Road. I would also say, and this is an important point that I should have brought up, is that normally when you come here with a project, we would have to dedicate right-of-way to the county. In this case, it's very unusual. The right-of-way has already been dedicated. So the 41 feet is measured from the new right-of-way. In a normal project, we would be talking about, and that's probably 12 feet or back from what the former right-of-way was. So that makes the variance look worse because the dedication has already occurred.
Dr. Campbell, the alternative debate point is that while they're keeping the building in the same spot, I think they're probably intensifying it because it's going to be 40 feet tall. So if they can move the building, it requires them to change the plan. So they can comply with the setback requirements. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Well,
It just requires,
the riparian buffer cuts across the site, basically how I'm drawing my marker. So we cannot simply just move the building back.
well, you got parking there. It seems you could.
No, because then the building would not be in the same location, and the DEP would not accept that as a permitted activity in the riparian zone.
Because it has to be in the same footprint,
Correct.
Unless you move it to the back of the site.
unless you move it to the back of the site where the parking is now for the employees,
Yes.
which is a consideration.
In addition, so from the center line of the pavement, what is the right-of-way? How much space is there from the
The
center line
pavement
to
is
your building?
25 feet.
Right,
The
current
right-of-way
pavement-
is 40 feet from the center line. 80 foot,
So now you're proposing 80 feet from the center line and a dualized, let's say a dualized white.
40 feet from the center line is the right-of-way. 25 feet from the center line is the curb. I skipped over that. We are proposing curb and sidewalk along Whitesville Road. I forgot that.
How hard would it be to shift the building to the back? And would it be possible?
Anything is possible.
My confusion is, why is that storage area so important?
The storage area is so important because I've spent a tremendous amount of time with my client, Grass Landscaping, honestly. I deal with a lot of clients, and they've been an absolute pleasure to work with because they are a company that is functioning, that does, my view of them, even as they cut the lawn in my office, is they do a wonderful job. But we're not talking theoretical things about, they know what they need. They have a yard now, they need more of a yard, they know what they need.
Right, but in my simple mind, if you reduce the size of that storage area, the warehouse moves down, and you could actually not need a waiver for a setback because all your neighbors have had to adhere to setbacks. And now you want to put a crooked building right on the corner, which, like Jeff said, me as a firefighter, first of all, it's 45-foot tall building. Half the ladder companies in this town will struggle to even reach it. Now two sides don't even have access. The other building, because of where it is, you don't have access to the west side or the south side at all, and it's a major issue. Is that also going to be a stand-up slab building?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I believe the materials for that building are a metal building.
No? Okay. Yeah, I mean,
It's 24 feet high.
I'm
It's
looking
not,
at the little picture here.
I understand. My understanding is there's a masonry shelf, if you will, on the ground, and then
So it's a lightweight construction tied into the steel frame?
with the steel, prefabricated steel above that.
Okay. So, I mean, yeah, so I'm looking at it, I'm trying not to be a jerk here, but all this storage, where if you juggle it around, you're not gonna offend the neighbors, you're not gonna be struggling to shoehorn it by any street paving, and it'd be a simple process.
I understand.
So, I'm just wanting a little clarification on that, that's all.
So you would, regarding the side yard setbacks, I understand you're encumbered over here from your wetlands. The total side yard setback in the zone is 75 feet?
The total required is 75 feet. We have 41.
All right, so you're proposing really 31 and 10.
Correct.
You wouldn't think at least to give the 50% of it on the other end, which you're not encumbered?
You're talking about the setback to the warehouse building?
Correct.
Well,
Yeah,
that complies. though.
We comply with the
You
setback on
comply,
that
but
side.
not your,
That side
again, I'm
complies.
talking about half your total. Your total is 75.
The total
minimum is
doesn't
30.
comply.
You know, at least get us to half your total there. You know, half your total, you know, at least that's a little bit closer to, you know, not saying, okay, you'll comply with the minimum 30 on one side and just forget about as if the total doesn't exist.
Yeah, the problem's going to be the lot's narrow, so to expand the
Because
setback.
again, you want to have that extra yield with, you know, just a lot, like, I was just turning back to what Mr. Riker said, just a lot of yield for for the property.
Again, our buildings, recall, are less than half of what the allowable building coverage is. So it's not as if we're overbuilding the site with roof. We're not. We're less than half of what we're permitted. I understand the points about the office in the front. I fully understand the questions.
My responders that go in there.
I understand.
You know, it's about health and safety, not aesthetics.
Anyone else from the board have any?
Probably.
Mr. Riker.
Ian, forgive me if you've answered this. Where the office building is, I know it's up against the riparian buffer. Is it permissible to pave that area and utilize it for parking?
Where the building's located, you're asking.
Where the office building is designed?
And I looked at that when I first took the project. We examined it very carefully, the flood hazard regulations. In my opinion, the answer is no, but I'm willing to try anything.
Well,
I mean,
the follow-up question.
if I need to make that interpretation with the state, I'll do so.
All right, and my follow-up question is, and I don't know the answer, is, are you allowed to average?
No,
Not in this zone?
no.
Okay,
No, riparian buffers cannot be averaged.
okay. Thank you.
But the redevelopment, when you're dealing with a riparian buffer, as we normally would, that's forested or lawn, it's pretty straightforward. You can't develop in there except for a very minor footprint. It gets a little more challenging and a little more when you're dealing with a pre-developed site like this, because they allow you to redevelop, but they seem to handcuff a little bit. So,
I asked Mr. Borden while you were speaking, having heard all of your concerns, we're willing to take a look at how we can either eliminate or perhaps mitigate that variance relief associated with that front building. Obviously, we can't do that on the fly. We'd have to come back. We'd also have to check the DEP regs to see if we could park there rather than put a building there, which would trigger different variance relief, right? Yeah. So
So again, our goal is for you to be successful. And our goal is to improve, certainly this is going to be an improvement over what's there now. Amen. I've been driving by that place since 1970, and it's not improving. So we're anxious to have you do it, but we want to do it the right way. And we want to be able to make sure that everyone is comfortable, and we're doing it right from the get-go. So to bring you
understood.
back would be, it seems to me to be the more prudent choice.
What we don't want to do is relitigate the issue, we spent the 45 minutes debating about the ordinance. So if we've overcome that, then we're willing to come back, hopefully with a revised plan to address
Great,
your
thank you.
other
Right, well, just to be clear, so the stipulation that the applicant's willing to make is that you have to be renting one of the contractor shops in order to have an office and to be able to use the outside storage facility. So it's across the board. All right. So
Yes.
you can't have one and then the other and then the other, okay. And then you're going to pave the office spaces.
Well, that may change completely.
Yeah, based
if we
upon
move
the
building.
revised plans.
You're seeking any waiver for parking?
Right.
Other than a fully improved,
Right.
curbed, paved lot
Right.
per the ordinance.
And then just, I'm not asking the applicant to do this, but if the applicant could have some testimony as to the traffic circulation, that may be beneficial as well.
We have a traffic engineer, so
All right.
we're not going to get into it
No,
tonight,
yeah,
obviously, but-
okay, gotcha.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So we're going to request you carry it to the January 8th meeting
Yes,
with
and Laura
everything
should be able
else?
to give you a date as a sidebar. We do
Oh.
have a tentative
Yeah.
schedule, so we'll discuss it with Laura after for a date.
Okay, that's fine. And we need to figure out how much time we need to.
Thank you. And again, can I just, while you just do that, can I open it up to the public for a minute?
Please, please.
People, just so you could get a
Yes.
full gamut of comments before
Thank
you
you.
come back. Thank you. If anyone from the public would like to come forward and discuss this application, please step forward. Thank you. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you present is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name, spell your last, and your address, please.
David J. Visconi, Visconi. Live at 441 Whitesville Road, which is directly adjacent to the south side of the property here. I'm not a professional public speaker, so bear with me, please. I lived in my location, my residence, for 42 years. 42 years. And unfortunately, over the course of time, I have seen a deterioration of the neighborhood conditions. And part of that is because...
Hang on, just one sec. So I think when we said we're going to open up to the public, I think we meant cross-examining Mr. Borden as to his planning testimony. So if this is a general comment as to the entire application and how you feel about it personally, we're going to save that until all the way from the very end when testimony is closed. But if you have any questions right now as to the testimony that was presented.
Yeah, I do.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You can feel free to ask Mr. Borden any questions you have. Just it has to be what you call cross-examination questions as the testimony he provided, just not general statements as to your personal beliefs or anything like that. You'll have another shot at it to do that. It just won't be right now because it's just cross-examination.
Okay. Mr. Borden mentioned retail activity.
There will be no retail sale.
Okay. But there is now,
I don't know what's...
right, Mr. Borden?
I'm not exactly sure what that use is there now. I've never, but no retail sales will be.
You've been to the site, right?
Actually, yeah, I bought a piece of, they sell like outdoor furniture, but I don't know.
Isn't that retail?
It might be wholesale, it might be retail, I don't know. But irrelevant to me because we're not going to have any retail sales as part of this project. That use will no longer exist on the property.
Okay, you made mention of the right-of-way, and you threw out a lot of numbers which I really couldn't follow. But to put it basically, the failed project to the south of me attempted to purchase a good deal of my front yard for their exiting of that site, which I rejected. Is this project going to try to do the same thing and take part of my front yard to facilitate entrance into the project?
Hang on,
project-
just a second. So So your occupation is, do you work for the township?
I do,
You do, okay.
yes.
So just, I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying that if you're going to be here, you're not speaking on behalf of the township, correct? You're here in your individual
I'm not.
capacity. No, that's what I'm saying. It's a different standard when somebody comes here and says, I'm here from the township, or I'm just here because I have a personal interest, you know, in the application, or I'm an interested party or something to that effect. So I'm just making sure that it's on record you're here simply as a citizen because you're an interested party in this and you're not representing the township.
Mr. Shea, every time I come up to this podium, the same question comes up. And I have never stated that I'm here representing the township.
No, that's why I'm
here
that's
as
why I'm
a
asking.
private,
I know I'm just asking you that so it's as a
taxpaying
matter of
citizen.
record so that there's not any ambiguity as to that, just so it's clear with everybody. Because I don't want to see anything coming back to hurt anybody. So that's, I'm just, I don't want to say I'm watching your back here, but I'm just making sure that you are here as an individual citizen, as an interested party, and that's it.
correct.
Okay, that's
Yes.
good.
So, Mr. Borden, can you respond?
Yes.
The answer is, to our knowledge, we do not need any land from this gentleman for the road widenings that we're required to make.
I asked that
Road
question.
improvement, I guess.
Part of the reason I asked that question is because the problem with my front yard developed years after the failed development to my south started. It was almost as an afterthought. Oh, by the way, we need this. That's why I asked the question. Mr. Borden, there was some talk about septic versus sewer. And Mr. Borden indicated there might be an issue with the sewer hookup, which I don't understand because the development that didn't happen to my south had a pumping station installed. So I don't understand where the problem is.
No, that's a great question, because as you correctly point out, all the infrastructure is in place for sewer. We have a 12-inch main in front of the property. It flows down to a pump station, as you correctly state, to the south of us. But the issue was one of capacity. And it's not capacity of the pipe or the pump, but it's capacity from the downstream receptor, which is Toms River MUA. There's an agreement between Toms River MUA and Jackson MUA that Toms River will accept a certain gallonage. And that gallonage basically at the maximum capacity now. So it's a paper capacity. It's not a real-life capacity issue. And that is being worked on to resolve that.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. So, again, that goes, so we're cross-examining Mr. Borden as to his capacity as a planner. Is there a possibility that we can bring back an engineer?
We have an engineer, yes. He will testify at some point.
But we're talking about the agreement, Mr. Shea, and I wrote that agreement 25 years ago. So I don't know where you're going, but there's nobody more qualified than me to speak about that. It's not engineering. It's a developer's agreement.
As Mr. Riker pointed out, the place, since the current owner bought that property, the place has turned into a dump. I took several pictures today to verify that in case you folks aren't familiar with it. So as a result, let's say I personally have credibility issues regarding the applicant's ability to maintain this property like it should be, based on the current conditions now.
We heard Mr. Riker's comment. I'm going to pass it on to my client, and hopefully between now and the time we come back here, we can make progress in cleaning up the site. That's all we can do with that. Can't change what happened. All we can do is look forward.
There was also talk about the use of the back property for the parking of vehicles, tenant, occupants of the warehouse versus not being a tenant. What happens if 2 years after this is built, I start seeing RV and boats being parked in the back?
Then you
How
call-
is that apparent violation of the rules of engagement dealt with? Because it happens all the time. Applicants come in and say, well, we're going to do this, this, and this, and then as time goes on, they take an inch, and then they take a foot, and then they take 100 yards, until it becomes apparent to the township, and then it's damage control. So it exists across the street from me. I'm surrounded by it. So what's the procedure if the rules of engagement are established and then those rules are violated? What happens?
Well, that's an enforcement issue, but to respond to you,
Enforcement for who?
the town has the power to enforce the ordinances.
Zoning officer, code enforcement?
I can't give you the legal advice on who you would go to, but to answer the first part of your question, an RV can't be stored there because the only outdoor storage is related to contractors in the construction and building trades, and it's for their material and equipment, so it's not personal RVs or things of that nature.
Bad example. Sorry.
Okay, but that's what's permitted. If it's associated with a contractor's use, then their equipment and vehicles and supplies can be
Right.
stored back there.
Okay. There was mention of public water, before I forget, runoff.
We didn't get to the drainage yet. We have an engineer who will talk about that at a subsequent meeting.
Okay. There was talk about drilling a well for irrigation purposes. It was my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, that if public water is available and no well exists, or the well that you have goes bad, you cannot drill a well. You have to use public water. Am I incorrect about that?
Yes. Typically, the Jackson-Hemingway discourages use of public water for irrigation. So every commercial job that we've done, me and my company, for the past 25 years, we've always proposed a private well for irrigation water. And that's across all townships, not just Jackson Township. Strictly it's a non-potable well for irrigation water only.
My well is 25 feet deep underneath my basement. I'm concerned about this because I'm sure that if this occurs, thousands of gallons of water will be used to do the irrigation. Meanwhile, my water level in my well is dropping. So that concerns me.
I think
I was not aware that there's an exception to what you're stating.
So without going into detail with that, that would technically be an outside agency approval, so they would apply to the DEP and they would get, environmental, everything like that. Oh, sorry about that. So when it comes down to that, we're looking at just that specific question, right? That would be an outside agency approval. So that would be a DEP issue when it comes down to the irrigation and water potability and everything like that. So it's not necessarily something that the board has significant jurisdiction over, because it is a DEP that really renders that determination. So that happens during resolution compliance.
So if the DEP says it's okay, it overrules
Well, it
the
doesn't
township
necessarily
ordinance?
overrule because the board doesn't have the authority or jurisdiction to rule on it anyway. So the DEP is technically the overall authority. So if DEP comes back and says, no go, doesn't work, they actually have to come back before the board and redo all their plans. So it's not necessarily something like we don't have any control of. We absolutely do not have any control over that. It has to be approved by way of the DEP. And it's not just this, I mean, it's across the board, it's the state. It's every single application that ever comes before the zoning board or planning board.
I'm not understanding your explanation. So say my well went dry, went bad, and I know there's a water, there's a water pipe run past my house. Based on what you're saying, I could go ahead and drill a well anyway? Even
No,
though
so-
the
so
ordinance says I
that-
have
that
to
would-
hook
it would
up
be-
to...
It would be a situation where
This
you,
is really getting,
yeah, I mean,
this is
this
really
is-
getting way out of the purview right now. We're really just coming to
No,
cross-examine.
I don't think so.
There's, you have three, and again, I'm not supposed to give you legal advice, but you got three different avenues. You can contact the township engineer contact the MUA, the Ocean County Board of Health, or the DEP. I don't know personally which one would be able to be the best authority that could help you out the most in that situation. Maybe the township engineer.
Well, maybe that's another ordinance that needs to be looked at.
I mean, it could be, but that's the township council,
Okay.
yeah.
I didn't hear any talk about a fence. And the reason I bring that up is because since the furniture guy established his presence there, I have been inundated with trash.
And this is not public comment, this, just please,
Yeah.
we do limit this to 5 minutes.
Okay, is there a
Anybody
fence
announce
going to be built?
Well, that would, let's ask that of
Mr.
Mr.
Borden.
Borden.
Yes, we are proposing a fence around the rear storage area. There's no fence proposed forward of that.
What are you showing, what's the rear storage area?
Yes, let me point it out. We are proposing a fence along here, across the side, back side. So this part of the property will be fenced. Again, there's no outdoor storage or any activity proposed behind the warehouse or in front of the warehouse, other than maintenance of landscaping.
And the 30 feet between the back of the warehouse and my property line, what is that going, what are you doing there?
That is a small stormwater, linear stormwater basin.
And how is that going to work?
Well, Mr.
Does-
McFarland will
does-
provide
does
the
it
testimony.
percolate?
It's
The
going to be,
engineer will
it's going to be
go
an
over that.
engineering question. Yeah.
Okay. Delivery vehicles, do I need the engineer for that?
Well, I testified that all the delivery vehicles would load and unload back here.
No, I'm talking about, is there a restriction about size?
No.
Are we going to have 70-foot tractor trailers pulling in and out?
You could have a tractor trailer come into the site to unload in the back, yes. Oops, where'd my thing go? Back here.
And deliveries are supposed to occur during the operating hours and days that you mentioned earlier?
I would say so,
I mean,
yes. Yes.
Is anybody going to be
Sorry,
delivering at
this is the
midnight?
last line of questioning, and after this, we'll go to the next.
The answer
We-
to your
we do
question
have-
was
we do get 5
yes,
minutes.
Sorry if I bored you.
same hours as the business hours, yes.
All right, thank you. Good answer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, thank you. Please come forward. Thank you for raising your right hand. Sorry, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony, information, questions, or comments you present will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name, spell your last, and your address, please.
Tom Smith, SMITH, 520 Whitesville Road.
Thank you.
All right, and just to be clear one more time, so we do 5 minutes, that is a time, but it's just a cross-examination questions, Mr. Borden, not general comment. That will come at the next meeting if we
Correct. I'll
finish.
attempt the lightning
Yeah.
round for Mr. Borden.
That's, yeah.
Quickly, I understand there was no freshwater wetlands LOI's been done for that adjacent
Well,
lot.
we have verified, my office, myself have verified, there's no wetlands present on the property. The board engineer has asked us to obtain an LOI confirming the absence, and we've agreed to do that.
Correct, but the transition zone doesn't recognize property boundaries. The wetlands that are on just over that property line, the transition zone for that, the DEP minimum's 50 feet. I know the township has other setbacks, but that 50 feet's non-negotiable for a
I understand.
freshwater wetland.
That does not overlap the property either.
I'm sorry?
That does not overlap the property either.
It doesn't have to overlap. The wetlands on the next property, the 50-foot transition, doesn't recognize a property
I
line.
understand. And I'm saying the transition area doesn't overlap onto our property.
Okay, but if there isn't an LOI, how do you know? that?
Because I had delineated and obtained an LOI for the wetlands to the north of us 15 years ago.
And we would have to go back as a condition. if
So
this were
Right,
approved.
I say that because I did the wetlands and I have an LOI that's expired for the property to our north.
Okay, you did the delineation? or-
I did,
Okay,
my 2 feet and my 2 hands.
okay. The only thing is, I'm just concerned, I don't see how we get this far into this point when it could be a flat no
No.
from the DEP.
And it's,
So that really is
We've,
critical.
we've
to
gotten
get
this
that
far
LOI.
because I have all the facts.
Again, if it's a
It's
no, then they come
standard.
back.
it's standard that outside agency conditional approvals are always.
Yeah, what happens if it goes to DEP, DEP says no, they got to come back and do everything all over again.
Okay, and then as far as I apologize, I didn't look up the industrial zone setbacks. The side setback, is that 10 feet or 20 feet
30 feet.
for the industrial zone? Okay, so all the setbacks, the 10 foot for the building, for the parking lot, and for the drainage basin?
Building setback.
Okay, so that doesn't apply to parking areas, is that what you're saying? in
The
layout?
parking setback is 10 feet.
10 feet, okay, and then the same for the drainage basin, I guess, because that's a
There's no
constructed feature?
setback for the drainage basin.
Okay, and that's in the regulation at some
Yes,
point that you can
yes.
cite? Okay. The only other thing I wanted to point out, and if I could provide the board just an SDS sheet, because these gravel, it talks about millings. I see a lot of them done, and even next door to me with concrete millings. This is Clayton's SDS sheet. There's silica in that material. It's not made to be a final cover. So if these applications, if the board would look and recommend stone, asphalt millings are also allowed, but they're not supposed to be a final cover.
Mr. Smith, I asked the applicant to pave, and he agreed if we
Okay.
would waive.
Yeah, I'd actually just like to leave this for you, the board. It's, any,
We're already at paving. I asked that, and he agreed to it.
okay.
All parking will be paved.
Yes.
Yeah,
He he agreed to it, so.
Or stone is fine, yes. And then the only other thing I heard was that grass doesn't use or store any hazardous chemicals. So are they basically just a mowing company, or do they, if you said you know them pretty well, they do
No,
any
they do
treatments?
lawn maintenance. I'm sure they store fertilizers and herbicides and.
Because landscape contractors do store chemicals that are not commercial products. They need a special permit for it. So to say that there's going to be no hazardous material stored, I'm sorry, I don't think that's accurate.
No, I mean, I simply disagree. These type products are not hazardous materials.
Okay.
Because there are products that any person can buy. They just buy in larger quantity than myself as a homeowner can buy. That's the only, it's the same product that I can buy at Home Depot.
Right, and we also, the board doesn't have jurisdiction to determine what
Correct.
substances are, that's actually a statutory thing. So somebody does an inspection and it's a statutory violation, it's a civil or enforcement penalty
Yeah.
that the board doesn't have any jurisdiction to take a look at.
And the only other thing is with this application, I appreciate the fact that there is ties to tenancy and buildings and use areas, so that you don't have these transient tenants out in the back areas that nobody knows who they are, when they're coming in or out. I know enforcement can't be called and try to keep up on that stuff. So I appreciate that it's all being tied together to try to keep that transient down. So that's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no one come forward, I move to close the public portion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So,
Mr. Chairman?
this application will be put.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry, Mr. Clee, sure.
I'll be brief. Just so I'm clear, the office building, we wanted to keep it in the same footprint because of the repairing. The regulatory agency is the DEP that says that, you can rebuild on that footprint, but you could move it and comply with the front setbacks.
Well, we could move it outside the riparian buffer.
And-
Or what I've been asked to do is investigate whether I could redevelop the building not in the same footprint, but yet within the riparian buffer, because the entire riparian buffer is developed with pavement and buildings, so. I personally don't understand why the DEP is married to in the same footprint, but that is what the code says.
So the proposed pavement in there is also permitted.
Yes, because it's over existing pavement.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Herman, one more comment. Could you identify, Mr. Borden, on this plan, on the future site plan, where you're going to have waste pickup on the site?
He did.
He did?
We're going to have the
Sorry.
refuse in the back
I looked at the
storage
site plan, I
area.
didn't see it. My
And then
mistake.
the new plan will show that.
Thank you.
And that will be a refuse area for not only the warehouse building, but for the office building?
Yes.
And the office building is going to take their trash from where it's located now in the front to the rear of the site.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's go, we're going to pick this up. We'll take a sidebar. Block 22203, Lot 11, Whitesville Development LLC will be pushed off to the January 8th, 2024 meeting for scheduling purposes only. Please see Laura after to figure out a date.
But
I
just
have a
state
motion to move.
that there'll be no further notice to the public.
No further notice will be required, correct? May I please have a motion?
So
to
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll pick it up. Ms. Jennings will pick it up for your application next. Thank you. Mr. Alfieri, you wanted to,
Item number 4, I'm sure we're not going to get reached, so I'm going to request that it be carried also to the January 8th meeting so that we can get a new meeting date.
sure, so block 18602, lot 20.01, Dorathy's Lane minor subdivision will be carried to the January 8th meeting for scheduling purposes only. May I just please have a motion to?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
And there'll be no additional notice to the
No
public.
additional notice will
Thank
be
you.
required. Thank you. Next, block 21001, lot 24, Pitney Lane LLC, Mr. Klee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an application to amend a prior approval associated with the Chapel Acres subdivision. This was a subdivision that was approved and filed in the county clerk's office. Lot 24 involves a drainage basin. And the applicant's proposing to modify the shape of that drainage basin so as to allow for another residential dwelling to be built on the property. There's, in the original approval and on the subdivision plan, there's an indication of the lot 24 as non-buildable. So there's kind of the issue or the rub. We have a prior approval that specifically said this is a drainage basin lot, not buildable, but the applicant's coming and approaching the board saying, we're going to modify the drainage basin so we can build an additional home. The only question, other than supporting that request, is this lot was to be dedicated to the town, including the drainage basin, for them to own and maintain, and that never happened. So the lot and the drainage basin remain in private ownership. So the question is, if this is approved and a drainage basin, or a new home is built there, who's now responsible for that drainage basin, the maintenance of it? But, long and the short of it is, this map, the subdivision map says this lot isn't buildable, and the applicant's saying that, hear us and let's tell you why it should be.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Peters.
Mr. Chairman, this is a grading plan. I really didn't prepare a report. From a comment perspective, the project is in the R1 residential zone. This stormwater management facility appears to be from a previous major subdivision that was in the R1 zone. The applicant, although Doug had indicated they may build a house, there's no plans to build a house. There's no zoning analysis to be done. To the extent that the applicant wishes to discuss that, they should discuss having, is it going to be on a separate lot? Is it going to be a lot that's going to be owned by someone who owns the house and the stormwater management facility? But I think we should probably just get started with the applicant first and then figure out, do we need to go back to the old subdivision and figure out what was in that approval?
Thank you. Ms. Jennings.
Thank you. Good evening. For the record, I'm Donna Jennings from the law firm of Wilentz, Goldman, and Spitzer. As the board's consultants correctly indicated, the applicant is seeking an approval amendment related to a previously granted final major subdivision approval memorialized by resolution dated August 11, 1987, with respect to property located along Pitney Lane and identified as Block 21001, Lot 24 on the Jackson Township tax map. In the 1987 resolution, the planning board permitted the mother lots to be divided into 61 buildable lots and 1 non-buildable lot. The non-buildable lot contains the existing detention basin on approximately 3.48 acres. According to a note on the plans, but not in the resolution, the subject lot was to be dedicated to the township. The dedication never happened, and the applicant and its predecessors in title have paid the property taxes and insurance over the past 30-plus years, although it's my understanding that we believe the township has maintained the detention basin by mowing it, et cetera. There is no homeowners association in the development, so it's unique in that sense. I think nowadays there'd be a homeowners association, and the homeowner association will all kick in and pay for the maintenance of the detention basin. The applicant now proposes to reconstruct and shift the location of the existing detention basin to permit a new building on the property. To accomplish that, the applicant requests that this board grant relief from the condition that the subject lot remain non-buildable. It is the applicant's opinion that developing the lot would advance the more efficient use of land, and that said development would be consistent with the development pattern of the surrounding and immediate neighborhood. The applicant will present the testimony of the applicant's site engineer, Yosa Portno, to to describe the proposed modifications to the existing detention basin. I would just like to indicate there are no specific building plans because we didn't go that far because if the board decides that we're not entitled to lifting the condition, we wouldn't have plans. If the board agrees that the condition can be lifted, we would come back and with a plan to show you what we would do with the lot. That has not yet been decided.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Mr. Portnoy sworn in, and he can testify.
Thank you. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you present will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name, spell your last, and your credentials, please.
Okay, Joseph Portnoy, Portnoy, licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I presented before. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering from NJIT. I've been working in this close to 11 years in land development. I presented before many boards, but never before this one.
Thank you. We accept your credentials, and welcome to the Jackson Planning Board.
Thank you. Okay.
If you could then just describe the particular site. If you had an exhibit that you submitted to Anthony, perhaps you can pull that. Oh, it's up. There you go, Anthony.
Okay. So this site is located at roughly the intersection of Pitney Lane and East Veterans Highway. It actually does have some frontage on both. There's a lot that wraps around. As noted, it was approximately 3.48 acres, R1 single-family residential zone. So this site contains an existing stormwater basin that was approved as part of the Chapel Acres subdivision. The basin design is a grass bottom detention basin with, it's receiving runoff both from the Pitney Lane, but also some existing, off-site runoff that's passing through. From my review of the original plans, it seems like there was a pipe coming through there that passed through this area. So it's managing runoff from both on-site and off-site runoff. With the outlet control structure, the runoff continues to be discharged under Pitney Lane where it continues off-site. The applicant proposes to regrade the site to adjust the basin footprint to construct an approximately 1 acre buildable area consistent with the subdivision, which is 1 acre lots. This will be accomplished by regrading, flattening the bottom, adjusting the slopes. As part of that, the inlets in the basin will be extended. We have modeled. We've done an as-built survey of the existing basin. To determine what the existing rates of flows in and out of the basin are, and we have designed this to match or actually slightly reduce our proposed peak outflow out of the basin, so we're able to create a little more volume as together with this regrading. So we're slightly reducing both peak discharge out of the basin and the peak water surface out of the basin. It will be the same type of basin. It would continue to be a grass bottom detention basin as there is under existing conditions. And would be that we understand the town, even though it has not been dedicated to a town, the town is currently maintaining this basin, and we would expect we would seek that to continue.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Klee? Do you concur with his opinion that it's going to meet or exceed the current drainage?
Yes, the calculations indicate that the design maintains the existing design.
Maintains or exceeds?
Barely exceeds.
Sounds like it exceeds to me.
We'll note that we are maintaining. If you look at the plan, we are maintaining the southern basin, embankment, which has outlet control structure. So the regrading is around the other sides. We are not touching the outlet control structure or, that berm on that side of the basin.
And you indicated that there is an HOA or no HOA?
There is none.
So if the board would approve it, you would come back to subdivide?
I don't know exactly whether it be a subdivision or that would be some type of an easement. They haven't decided.
But
To me, it makes most sense that they would subdivide it, but, I'm not the one deciding.
But ultimately, you would want the township to maintain responsibility for the ownership and maintenance of that lot or that easement area.
Yeah, I think that we probably would perfect the dedication. I mean, it's not in the resolution, so it's not really clear. It's just written on the plan, so I'm not really sure what was supposed to happen, but there is no homeowners association, and that is for the benefit of the entire development.
I will note also that it does accept runoff from off-site as well. So there are off-site drainage areas coming through that. So I don't know if that was why it was assumed ownership by the town and not a homeowners association.
And typically, when the municipality takes over the drainage basin, they also collect a fee. Would the applicant be willing to pay that fee, whatever that fee might be, and I really don't know, for the township to take the O&M responsibilities?
Well, I presume if that's subject to an ordinance requirement, they would have to, so I would assume he would, but I would have to ask him.
But there probably wasn't a requirement or a need for that when this was originally approved. But if we're bringing up the current standards and you want the town to maintain it, there needs to be a payment of a maintenance fee.
Right, I just don't know, do you have any sense as to what that maintenance fee is?
No.
Is that an issue that the board would discuss anywhere? That's really up to I don't know if that's the township.
It's something that typically comes out, we would measure the area of the basin, extend it 25 feet, multiply it by 25 years. I think in the number is $1,025, whatever all those numbers multiply out to be. That would be the fee.
Well, that sounds reasonable to me. So yes, if that's in the ballpark, if it's $1 million, I think I would say no. But you're telling me about $1,000, I think the answer is yes.
But it's probably going to be more than 1,000. It won't be $1 million. And won't be that high either. And just any thoughts on why the prior approval restricted development of this entire property to only the drainage basin?
No, we couldn't find anything that gave us any type of indication, and my client was not the original developer, so I don't know. But I'll have to be honest with you, I've been running into these types of things, not just here in Jackson, but in other towns. I don't know what was going on in the 80s, but people were not doing what they were supposed to be doing, and when you get an approval, you're not supposed to even get your first building permit until you've met all the conditions of the approval. And here, clearly on the plan, it said that it was supposed to be dedicated to the township. I don't know why they let them build the entire development, and that never happened.
I'm just thinking this, when the original board considered the application, there might have been some reasoning why this, because obviously you can put a lot on, or a house on it because that's what you're proposing, but why was there a need for maintaining this as open space? You don't know and I really don't know, but that's just a question. Thanks.
Ms. Peters?
Again, I didn't, from a planning perspective, review this, but from a township perspective, I guess I have a couple of questions if the town's going to take this over. Mr. Portnoy, I would assume that the original design was done in accordance with whatever design standards were in place in 1987?
Correct.
You would agree that those standards are different now?
Yes.
And you've calculated your calculations reconcile the current state stormwater management regulations?
Yes, I've actually discussed this with the NJDEP. This obviously, like, noted that the standards have changed multiple times since this was designed and constructed. The DEP's position is that a basin that's grandfathered can be modified, adjusted, moved over, as long as you maintain the same type of basin. So even though current standards are changed, as long as it was, for example, over here, this was constructed as a grass biome detention basin, as long as we maintain the similar design and also meet the existing peak discharges. So we have remodeled it not based on the original design flows, but we remodeled the entire drainage area to the basin based on the current, rainfall that's in use today.
Okay, so you have correspondence from the state?
It was a phone call I had with Dave Mahone at the DEP.
Did your design calculations add in the 1 acre lot that you're proposing?
So in regards to that 1 acre, it does account for that 1 acre lot, but only as lawn area because there's nothing there now. And to that point, the direction from the DEP is that because that basin was not designed for example, let's say a house on that lot, that house would need to be managed independently at current standards. So if we come back later to build a house on that lot, we would need to put some sort of stormwater management for that house independently, not based on the basin. So a dry well or something like that would need to be put in specifically for that lot.
So the grading of this basin would be greater than 5,000 square foot of disturbance, so you'd need to go to Ocean County Soils for an approval, correct?
Correct.
And you'd probably have to get some sort of water quality permit from them as well, right?
That would be part of the DEP, the Ocean County application. We have submitted to Ocean County Soils already.
My concern, and I apologize for belaboring this for the town, but for the board members and the public, but it's important to the town. The town's required to have an O&M manual, a design, we're audited, and so this basin, in its revised form, needs to be brought up to those standards, and whether the town's been taking care of it or not, I'll come back to who owns it, but when the Public Works Department gets audited for how this basin's being maintained, I am sure in 1987 there wasn't an operation and maintenance manual. So is there going to be one for the basin now?
Yes, we can definitely prepare an O&M manual.
Okay. So I apologize for asking what seem like sort of engineering questions, but I think it's important if we're going to hand this over to the Public Works Department in 2024, that they're able to reconcile that when DEP comes down and says, how are you maintaining your stormwater management basins? Ms. Jennings, the part I didn't understand in the beginning, you said that the applicant has owned the property for a period of time?
The applicant, and no, I mentioned the applicant and the predecessor in interest have paid the taxes and the insurance for the past 40 years. That's what I said.
Okay, I guess curiosity got the better of me. I'm not that nice a person. Did they own the property? Did they pick it up in a quick claim? How did someone decide to be nice and pay taxes on something for 40 years that wasn't theirs?
No, I said his predecessor in interest, and he purchased the lot from the predecessor in interest.
Okay. I'm just wondering, because the town went and did maintenance on their property for those 40 years, and maybe we should have sent them a bill. That's all I have, thank you.
Sure. Given the potential proximity of that basin to a home, is there fencing around that basin?
There is no fencing there right now. We can put in
I think
fencing.
it would be prudent,
Yes.
given it's in, I can't see what the surrounding homes are, but that one
Yes.
potentially could be hazardous to
Yes.
children. So we could make sure that there is appropriate fencing, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Peters, being that Mr. Portnoy testified that there is off-site water coming onto the property from, I guess, other township properties and other...
There is a storm sewer, at least coming from Murdoch Place, that the storm sewers, I presume township owned, are lead onto from Murdoch Place into this basin.
Is there a problem if it's under private ownership? Is the town allowed to discharge water
I
onto
don't want to
someone's property?
steal Mr. Clee's thunder, but stormwater management designs, you start out by saying what flows here naturally. So if it flows here naturally, doesn't matter where it comes from, it flows there naturally. So Mr. Portnoy has taken that into account in his designs. That's what he should have done. I'm just saying that this basin design probably needs to be reconciled by at least one other outside agency, whether, and Mr. Cleo will go through that probably in resolution compliance. It certainly requires Ocean County Soils to look at it, whether or not it was of a size that required the DEP to look at it originally. I'm not sure.
Really what I'm asking is there a potential issue for the town if Mr. Portnoy is testifying that there is non-natural water coming onto the site, stormwater coming onto the site through some sort of drainage system? Is there a potential issue for the town to be discharging its water onto a private individual's property? Meaning, if we were not to do anything, is there a potential problem for the town?
If we did nothing tonight and said no,
And this property owner decided, hey, the town has to stop discharging water onto my property.
the town would stop taking care of it and tell the owner to maintain it and take care of it.
No, correct, but what I'm saying is it's not the natural water.
Without doing an in-depth study, I would love to have the debate, but without going through the details or visiting the site, I'm not sure I could go forward with that. Ms. Jennings, you said you were familiar with the August 11, 1987 resolution? Is that, I didn't see that in the application packet. Do you?
Well, I didn't actually file the application. Another attorney did. I just took over. But you guys, we got the resolution from the town, obviously. But yeah, I have a copy here if you want to see it.
I just wonder if we want to make sure we have it in the record for this file. I haven't had an opportunity to look at it. I don't know if it originally was 61 building lots and one non-building lot. Was 61 the maximum number of units that could be built without a use variance or a density variance? I just, at some point in time, it's saying that we can build on this lot leads us to the next question, which is, will this be a detention basin lot with a house on it, or is it going to become two different lots? Because in the end, the town has to take it over, and it's on someone's property. There's a covenant and a deed restriction is necessary. And if someone's going to subdivide a lot, we have to make sure that an additional subdivision to the original isn't a problem. And then the town's got to take the lot over. So while it was nice that someone took care of this for a while, it's an unresolved problem, just like some of our ordinances. It probably needs to get cleaned up in 2024.
Quick question for the chair, and it may sound like a silly question, but can the attorney simplify what is being asked of the planning board, and is it as of right? What specifically, just in simple terms, are they asking for this evening?
Just removal of a condition is really all it is.
And what would be the impacts of removal? I'm hearing, is it creating a new lot?
No, so what it would be doing.
What's the benefit to the applicant, and what's the benefit to the board to approve it?
So we have a situation here where the site never got dedicated to the township. So it's still, the property owner still owns this. And even though the township's been taking care of it, the owner has still been, paying all the money and taxes and everything like that. So technically, they.
Well, a new owner who took it over very.
Right.
So I just want to make sure we're being accurate. We're not talking about somebody 40 years ago. We're talking about somebody recently took it over. Are they looking to release a condition to build on it and then refashion a detention basin? I'm just trying to understand.
So it's an interesting question, right? Because we don't know entirely what they're going to do because of the fact that we don't have the new plans for the application. In order for them to even tell us what they would want to do and us to be able to physically like see everything, see the whole package, they have to file the application to do that, but they can't file the application to do it unless we remove the condition that basically is irrelevant for the last 40 years anyway. So it's kind of like chicken before the egg, but at the same time, they've been doing everything. They've been acting in a manner for the last like 40 or 50 years.
Who's they? I'm sorry.
Right, it would be the owner.
For 40 years, the current owner.
I think, so the resolution, no, so the previous owner. So the resolution was what, like 87?
1987,
So when did
just
it
shy
change
of 40
hands?
years.
So-
When did it change hands, as an example? I mean, just trying to understand what we're talking about.
I don't know when the applicant bought the property.
Was
I'm
it
not,
months ago? Was it years ago?
I'm not sure that's really relevant.
I'm
I
not
mean,
asking you, I was asking the attorney.
Yeah,
Thank
so,
you.
so the problem is that it's irrelevant in the fact that a contract purchaser steps into the shoes of the individual who owned the property.
So it's a
before.
contract purchaser, okay, thank
So-
you.
Right, so yeah, I'm assuming that is,
I honestly
It-
don't know if he
it's kind
owns
of-
it. I believe he owns the property.
yeah.
I don't think he's a
it's kind of
contract
irrelevant.
purchaser.
Once you own the property, whether it's, especially quitclaim deed, you buy everything you buy the resolutions, you buy the approvals, you buy even the problems of the property.
So the applicant has standing?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so just to clean this up real quick. Ms. Jennings, you testify that your client has control of the property deeded.
Correct.
Okay. My question to you is, to move this along, would you take control of operating and maintaining the basin to your client if we were to act in favor of subdividing or whatever legal mechanism there is to divorce that basin from the potential new lot? Would your
I think
client-
I think what he would want to do is dedicate the lot to the detention part to the town, like it was supposed to be, and the town would maintain
I
it.
understand what he wants, but that wasn't my question. Would you
Right.
be amenable?
I don't think he would be amenable to that, no.
Okay, so your client,
Because then he's responsible for everyone's, the 61 lots coming onto the property, the township water coming from somewhere else. It's all
Okay.
dumping onto that lot.
so your client does not want to maintain that?
He does not want to maintain it.
Okay.
And just for the record, when the actual application was approved in '87, it was in the R40 zone, which was 40,000 square foot lots, and it was a total of 78.89 acres. So it was approved as 61 buildable, 1 non-buildable lot. So the lots range from 40,000 square feet to whatever to come up to the 78 acre total.
All right, what is the size of the lot that you would ultimately desire?
1 acre,
1 acre.
because it's 1 acre zoning, it's in the R1 zone.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open it up to the public. I'm sorry, do you have any more witnesses?
No other witnesses, but we did get a text message, and the client bought it 2 years ago.
Thank you.
And I believe until then, it was owned by the original developer.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open it up to the public. If anyone would like to speak on the application, please come forward. Thank you. Thank you for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony, information, questions, or comments you present before the board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name, spell your last, and your address, please.
Cindy Zanki, Z-A-N-K-I, 1009 East Veterans, 995 East Veterans, and 991 East Veterans.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I was present when Primavera was built in '87, and I remember I was at the meeting, and they dedicated that lot because of the runoff and all of the homes that were being built, also because of the wetlands that are in the area. I have wetlands across the front of my property, and there are two, they're called outfalls, and they're from Pitney, number 9 Pitney, and they're from Stacy Court. And I spoke to Jim Simmons today at the engineering, Ocean County Engineering, and he had told me that this was deemed non-buildable because of all of the runoff, and the covert that goes across Pitney empties right into my property. If this is disturbed, and I also talked to someone at the DEP, and they're going to get back to me with more testimony on what this will disturb, they said that it is possible that if this is disturbed in any way, that our property, our wells, our well water, our water levels, our basements will be impacted
Right, but
greatly.
just to make that clear, though, so if the DEP made that decision.
They didn't make that yet.
No, but what
Okay.
I'm saying to you is that it's a two-step process. First, they have to file an application, all right? And the application would have to come before us, all right? And then we would either have to approve or deny it. If we approve it, then that would go to resolution compliance, and then that would go to DEP. If the DEP says no-go, it's going to disturb way too much, or there's certain issues, they would then have to come back before the board and redo the whole application. So I get where you're coming from. There's just two more steps in the way between what you're saying right now and the eventual, DEP coming back and saying no.
Well, this
So-
was put before the board, and it was, when we all...
No, I get you, but what I'm saying is that, I'm not saying don't stop talking. I'm just saying that what you're talking about would be two steps further along the way. And if you are correct, the DEP would basically say, no good, then they would have to come back and redo everything. Yeah.
More than likely, yeah, because they had said they
That's what I'm
actually
saying,
have 4
so-
applications
right.
they'd have
Yes,
to go
but
through for
for-
soil
for
erosion.
tonight-
But that's not before us
For
tonight, that's the
tonight,
whole thing.
we're just looking at the basin. We're not looking at the buildable lot, we're not looking at what's gonna be built, what could be built, what might be built.
Yep.
We're just looking at the basin.
Okay,
That's
well,
all we're interested in.
Then the basin was put there for a specific reason, and I went with the engineering today, talked to Jim Simmons, like I said, and he had said that the drain off of Stacy Court, Pitney, and there's a pond behind number 9 Pitney, which it's probably that house there, will be running off and causing larger water damage if it is not maintained to hold the quality, quantity, and volume of water.
It's going to be better. That's our goal. We're making it better.
Well,
We're allowing them to improve it and bring it up to standard. If we approve it.
If you approve it.
We're allowing them to bring it up to a standard that it hasn't been at in the last 40 years.
Well, they told me that Jackson also owns that, and they're also responsible because it hits East Veterans. And I know Jackson has been maintaining it because I see them, and I also me and my husband run there's a border around that's a very nice exercise area. So
Good.
that was part of the arrangement too, back in '87. So I'm opposed to it, actually, because I don't want to run into any future problems with all of my properties and the water levels. So-
But what I'm trying to say is, what's there now is not being maintained or looked at in an appropriate manner. It's 40 years old and in not the best repair. What they're planning to do is make it so that it's up to standard, up to code, and it will be an improvement and more protection, not less protection.
Okay, and Ocean County does maintain the runoff, they told me, and the coverts. So whatever is working now, so that's my point.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Would anyone else like to come forward? Thank you. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you present before the board will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name, spell your last, and your address, please.
First name's Frank, last name's Urso, U-R-S-O, resident of 1041 East Veterans Highway. This basin is in my backyard, and my backyard floods as it is. Water table's low. Disturbing it is going to disturb a lot. I don't see, that's a huge undertaking to try to make it better. Especially the runoff, like the previous person says, it covers Stacy Court, it covers, all the properties throughout my backyard. And I span 3 acres of that. I'm just voicing my concern.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for the applicant?
Other than if we're going to undertake such a project, fencing, make it safe. I'm thinking it's going to cost more than it's worth, but yeah, it's your thing. So, good luck.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward?
Seeing no one else come forward, I move to close the public portion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Jennings. Would you like to close?
No, all I'd like to say is I do believe that it's an opportunity to take an old basin and bring it up to better standards than there are today. I think it would be an opportunity to perfect what was supposed to happen back in '87 by giving the township the property with the understanding that they'd have to pay some type of a maintenance fee. I do think that perhaps adding a fence would also be an improvement for the neighborhood. And, you know, the lot that would be created would be consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. They're all 1 acre lots or more. And therefore, I think that this is a good idea.
Thank you. And you agreed to a condition of approval, putting in a fence surrounding the basin?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Presley? Sure, Ms. Presley.
And supplying a manual. as needed
Exactly, yep.
nowadays. And we have to go back 40 years. This is 1 year before I started land use boards. The thing is, back then, the talking about bases like this was still, nobody knew what the results would be 10 and 15 years later. They were still very new. The new standards, after learning what they've done over 40 years, as Mr. Clee stated, would probably be an improvement. And I think that's what we're looking for. And if we're only looking at the basin tonight, that's what we're saying. It all has to come back to us, back to the DEP. I just want to make that part, if I have that right. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make the motion, based on what our professionals said, Mr. Clee, that is probably better. And being that you're looking at something that's been done over 40 years ago, with the standards today for basins and stuff, and knowing how the silt works, how the sands work, how the drainage works, so much better than years ago. I think there's a real chance of it being better, and that's what we'll look at if they come back, and the DEP will also look at it. So I'd make a motion to approve on that basis.
I second and mirror what Mr. Brezzi said. Hopefully, this improves the basin to make it better for the existing residents that surround it.
Thank you. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bressing?
Yes.
Mr. Bernstein?
He's not here.
Mr. Herring? Mr. Heller?
Yes.
Mr. Riker?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Marzo? Mr. Tremor? Mr. Wall?
No.
Dr. Campbell? Mr. Herman?
Yes, also, I believe that just to figure out the ownership structure, I don't like the township maintaining something that's not theirs, and I don't like township stormwater going on something that's not, just for both sides, so.
Years ago, townships had to start taking over the basins, and the DEP wanted that way, so there's some sort of structure. That's why they got to supply the manual and the funds for it. So it was done like that. There were also times during the years, back 30 years ago or so, that the township tried making the owners do it and take care of it, and it just didn't work. So there's a lot of questions to that. That's why it's probably dedicated.
Great, thank you so much, and everybody have a happy holiday and a happy new year.
Holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving right along tonight, we have Block 11801, Lot 80, Emmanuel Lutheran Church. And
Can you just repeat earlier, which one was carried over to?
Darathly's Lane subdivision? The 18602? 18602, correct. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Clee, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. An application for preliminary and final site plan associated with the construction of 11,000 square foot one-story church with 150 seats, 1,440 square foot parsonage, and 1,125 square foot sexton house, as well as a accessory pole barn building and a 600 square foot accessory shed. The applicant, there was a little bit of hiccup as far as the submittal of the application. The plans were originally submitted, review letters were written, the application was deemed complete, review letters were written. I believe Mr. Peters raised some jurisdictional questions, and revised plans were submitted that address those concerns. However, those plans weren't submitted within 10 days. And I believe it's going to be the applicant's position for the board to move ahead with the plans that were originally submitted, and that they would provide testimony that might be able to address Mr. Peters' concerns as far as the jurisdiction goes. But I think that's probably where we should start to see, how the revised plans reconcile Mr. Peters' concerns.
Mr. Peters.
Mr. Klee said it. They need to describe what's being proposed so we can reconcile that in this zone, that this is in fact a permitted or conditional use and can be approved by the planning board. Thank you.
And just for the record, so after speaking with the applicant's attorney, they're going to be restricted just to what they originally submitted, and for the record, the revised plans will be forthcoming. I don't think there's any major significant changes.
There really isn't, no.
Yeah, with that being said, we're going to let them move forward with what they already submitted.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record, Gregory Hawk, I'm an attorney with the firm of Darcy Johnson Day, appearing on behalf of the applicant, Emmanuel Lutheran Church, to present this application. As indicated by Mr. Peters and Mr. Klee, that's correct. We did submit an initial plan, and of course, we're going to address the board professionals' recommendations, suggestions, and I think meet most of them, and describe to you the changes that we are proposing to make it more conforming, really. This is, just to back up a little bit, my client currently operates a congregation in Lakewood. The Emmanuel Lutheran Church has been there since, my client told me, the 1930s. They've gone through quite a long period in their existing location in Lakewood. But things have changed where they are now. The demographics changed. They actually sold the current site to a new religious organization, and they're renting it back. So they're still operating out of there while they have the opportunity to hopefully find a new home. The demographics for the Lutheran Church indicate that this location, this area in Jackson, has a need, and they want to serve it. Their congregation in Lakewood had been diminishing over the years, getting a little smaller. And their hope is to grow it, which is always the goal for a church or a religious organization. And they feel this site will help them meet the needs of their current congregation, and more importantly, the future. They're looking to grow their congregation, and I think that's really an important part of this plan, is that it plans for today and it plans for the future. And if they're successful, they'll have everything in place to do that. So we do propose, as a phase 1 and phase 2, but even with phase 2, we tried to get ahead of the curve here a little bit and design the whole site to easily manage everything that could be built on the site. From a circulation standpoint, stormwater, coverage, all that's taken into account. And so we wanted to sort of get a plan for now and for the future, and that's really the purpose of the phasing. We do have a couple buildings on the site now. I'm going to present to you testimony from our design engineer, Pat Ward of Inside Engineering, who'll give you some overview of not only the engineering but some operations. We have Allison Coffin, a professional planner, here to talk about the accessory uses. There was a comment in Mr. Peters' report about particularly the two residences and how they dovetail and fit into this use. It's our position that they are a traditional, customary, incidental use accessory to this site. You've heard that's the magic language that's in your ordinance. We're going to address that. We're going to provide testimony as requested by the board professionals, and it's appropriate to show you that this is a completely permitted use. We're also going to, if we have time tonight, hear from Mark Paulser, who is the council president, church administrator, if there's any operational details we need to fill in that Pat can't handle. And we may even have some traffic engineering testimony tonight as well. But just to begin, we do have an exhibit up there of the existing site. You'll note from the board professional reports that the site now is currently developed with a residential home, and by my count, about 10 accessory structures, sheds, barns, pole barns, all kinds of stuff out there. Essentially, everything's going away. The only thing we're going to reuse is there's a pretty new and nice pole barn. We're going to keep that, relocate it, and the details of that will be provided by Pat in his testimony. It's our position that the use itself is permitted by your ordinance. It's actually a conditional use under your existing ordinance. I know you had some changes recently that happened to this zone, and Mr. Shea and I talked about this, and I think it's a consensus that based on when this application was filed, your existing ordinance does apply, and we do comply. So under your existing ordinance, churches, houses of worship are conditional use. There's a series of conditions. We do comply with all those, and Mr. Ward will go through those with you in detail. So again, leaving the only other use issue really is these accessory structures, which our planner will touch on as well. So hopefully we're able to answer everybody's questions tonight and give you a clear picture of what's going on. So with that, I'd ask that Mr. Ward be sworn in so he can testify.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you present be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name, spell your last, and your credentials, please.
Sure. Patrick Ward, WARD with Insight Engineering, licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. Have my license for just over 10 years at this point. I've been with Insight for 14 years. I have a bachelor's of science in civil engineering from Drexel University. I have testified in front of this board and other boards. So.
We accept your credentials. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Pat, could you give us an overview, I guess, beginning with what we're starting with and then work into the plan that was submitted?
Sure. So subject property is 218 West Veterans Highway, which is just west of here on County Route 528. We have about an 8-acre parcel that's partially developed. We're within the LC, the limited commercial zone. So the applicant seeking approval to construct a church and a handful of accessory structures and ancillary improvements at the subject property. But starting with what the site is today, we have an existing conditions aerial image overlaid with the tax map lines and some of the zone information and boundaries on that. So what you can see, and what Mr. Hawk said at the outset, was there is a single-family home there with a detached garage at its rear. There's another shed. Actually, there's a handful of sheds at the rear. There is a 2,400 square foot pole barn about a quarter way of the property, and you can see that. That's this larger building, right? This, quarter of the way back. And then as you go further in the back, there is some cleared areas. Those are fenced in. I call them paddock areas or some type with a barn amongst it for some sort of fenced in use. And I'm not going to speculate what exactly is within there, but most of the site or portion of the site is partially developed. And then the remainder, as you can see, is wooded. To the east of us is another religious use. To the west is a commercial type use up close to the road. And then to the rear is single family properties kind of almost off the map there that actually front on Leesville Road. So before I get into the site layout, and I want to touch upon the conditional use standards. And we do have a planner that's with us on the applicant's team that'll get into the actual testimony as to the uses and functions of each specific building that we're proposing. But I want to just go through the conditional use standards. That's ordinance subsection 244-115. And for churches and places of worship, which is a conditional use in the LC zone, we do meet the minimum required lot area of 2 acres. We do meet the minimum required lot width of 200 feet. We meet the frontage of 200 feet. Our building is going to be set back at least 100 feet from the public right-of-way and no closer, the principal building, no closer than 50 feet to any side or rear property line. No accessory structure will be within 30 feet. And there was something noted on the most recent letter from Mr. Peters about a deck of one of the accessory structures being within that 30 feet. It's the applicant's position that we're not seeking any relief for that. We will make that adjustment to meet the 30 feet or exceed the 30 feet in that location. The building coverage is less than 25%. The height will comply for all structures proposed. There is hours of operations and list of proposed activities and anticipated participants. We did provide a statement of operations. Mr. Paulzer is here to clarify that, but we do comply with that condition. Our primary frontage and access is from the county road, which is not a residential access street, so we comply there. And I think more notably, which was identified in Mr. Peters' initial letter, is the perimeter buffer requirement. So there was a comment or comments in his letter about, does the proposed landscaping within that buffer comply with the ordinance? Our revised plans, which we acknowledge weren't in time, but the board will see as this goes on at a subsequent meeting that we do provide the adequate plantings now in a revised condition to fully meet the buffer requirements. And I believe Mr. Peters would agree with that. And if not, the applicant's happy to work with the board professionals to ensure that that landscaping meets the ordinance. So in sum, we are not proposing any variance relief as a part of this application, whether it be conditional or just general bulk. So onto the proposed conditions, and if the gentleman that's operating the screen would be so kind to put up the proposed, and if you're able to zoom in a hair, that would be helpful as well. I'm not sure if that's, there you go. That's good. Okay, thank you so much. So, as Mr. Hawk said, all the existing improvements are to be removed except for that pole barn. And the pole barn was about here, it's being moved here. And I'll get to that in a moment. So what we're proposing is a new one-story main church building that will be located at the front of the property. And you could see it's got a couple wings to it, and I'll explain those in a moment. We are on a county right-of-way, so the Ocean County Planning Board has required us, as you probably are used to seeing, the typical pavement widening and right-of-way widening, and the tapers that go with it. So we are proposing an 11.5-foot dedication along the right-of-way. Our plans and our zoning reflects that on those plans, and we are proposing that widening. Off of West Veterans Highway, you'll see that we have the new driveway entrance here, and that directs congregants into and then around the proposed church building to the rear. At the rear of that main church building, we're proposing a 101-space parking lot. As you go further to the rear, we're proposing a new shed, which is tucked away right here, and then the pole barn next to it. And between those two structures is what we're going to call a private drive. And the private drive is meant to serve the two buildings all the way at the rear. One is a sexton house, and the other one is a parsonage. And I'll allow the applicant's representative, Mr. Palzer, and our planner to get into the actual details of the uses of those, but it's our position that those are accessory residential structures accessory to the church use itself. So the church building, in my opinion, the design's very simple. The main entrance is actually at the back of the church, so you can't see the main entrance from the street, and that's really to allow congregants to go directly from the parking lot right into the church and use any bit of the church that they need to. So you'll have an entranceway or an entry area called the narthex. Off to one side is a series of offices and classrooms, and on the paper here, it's off to the right, and meeting rooms, and the other side is the fellowship hall, which is like a multi-purpose room for the church. And then as you go to the south towards the front is, in the current phase, the initial phase is a 150-seat sanctuary. And what you'll see as we get to the architectural plans is there are future phase two, and what Mr. Hawk was leading to at the onset was the applicant's desire was to plan for the ultimate growth of this congregation, and with that, the ultimate development of the property. So what this layout, and really notably parking and stormwater, will account for is the maximum build-out. The applicant acknowledges that if this doesn't happen within a certain statutory time period, they have to come back for the expansion and actually to get their building permits, but the goal is to show these expansions and show how the site will look in the future. So this is a snapshot of, I don't want to say how many years, I don't know, I'm not in the congregation, but a snapshot to the future and the full build-out. The sanctuary is proposed in phase two to expand from 150 seats to 299, and then you'll see a wing off to the right here. Oh, I'm hitting the microphone. Over here, that's another future expansion with more of the conference classroom, meeting room type hallway for other uses within the church. There is a basement in a portion of the footprint. That's that right side here, the right wing with the classrooms. That's an unfinished basement. The goal there is to have it used for storage of any materials or anything that the church needs in its basement. The church building itself will have a gable asphalt shingle roof with vinyl siding. The spire, which you see on the architectural plans that have been submitted, is exempt from the building height requirements, which is in the ordinance, but the overall structure height will comply with the ordinance. In terms of the two structures at the rear, the sexton house and the parsonage, these will be used as they're designed. So they'll look as they are single-family residences for the church's sexton and the pastor. They are simple one-story dwelling designs with an attached garage, unfinished basements for storage, and rear decks, as you can see on the plans. The anticipation is that roof and siding materials will be similar to the church building, so complementary. There is a shed. There are no architectural plans for the shed yet, but we anticipate it will be your typical small, what you'd see as a residential shed aesthetically meeting the church and the accessory residential structures in terms of appearance. The pole barn, this is a 60 by 40 structure that's metal clad. It's like a bit of a standing seam facade and roof. We're seeking to keep this relatively new structure compared to the other improvements on the property and move it to the rear of the site as shown. To touch upon the county road improvements, we have already submitted to the county planning board. At their request and design direction, we are proposing to widen Veterans Highway to provide the necessary half width of pavement and their standard taper. Additionally, as I said before, we're proposing to dedicate 11.5 feet along the frontage to the county to meet their desired right-of-way half width. This design is pending their final approval. In terms of parking, access, and fire, we're proposing 101 spaces, as I mentioned initially. There are 5 ADA spaces that are required and are proposed. They're closest to the building. They're right by the main entrance there. We're also providing 4 EV spaces, one of which is within the ADA stall area as required. There is a central island. It's tough to see on this one because just the scale, but between the 2 parking banks, there's a central curbed island down the middle of the parking lot for congregants to safely access the front doors of the church from all the parking spaces. In response to Mr. Peters' review memo, his initial review memo, we've made this island slightly larger, added 2 feet on each side to account for the car overhangs, which was a great point in his letter. So now we have a 4-foot sidewalk with extra room on each side for any vehicle overhangs to not impede any of the congregants. Regarding fire, we just received, actually our office got it today, I'm not sure when everyone else may have received it, from the fire official, an updated letter that states that the proposed fire access on site is acceptable to their office. This includes the striping and the signage throughout the site. Just to comment on that, and something that might be different than the board's copies, is that, we did drive the fire truck through the property, not literally, but with our software that we use, that is the Jackson Township fire truck. We find that the pavement meets the necessary turning movements of that vehicle. Additionally, you can see them here. At the front of the building, we do have access on most sides of the front church with an ability to turn around for the fire truck. That was reviewed by the fire official. And then in the back, which we did have originally, but that private driveway kind of dead ends, right? It dead ends at the houses. So in order to allow for emergency apparatus or, and even an ambulance to get back there and not turn around on the dirt or the grass, we provide a stabilized grass area here that kind of tee off that dead end to allow a truck to maneuver. One of the comments in the, I believe it was Mr. Klee's letter, was about how those are going to be delineated. We'll be happy to work with his office to, whether it's posts with little signs, whatever needs to be done to delineate those, because they will look like grass. They're just stabilized grass. Offshooting from those stabilized areas are basin access paths, which will be clarified with Mr. Klee as we go forward with subsequent revisions if this gets approved by this board. In terms of utilities, public electric, gas, and water will be connected to the site from West Veterans Highway. At this time, the water service ends off-site, just about in the frontage of the property to our east. So our plans, or revised plans, indicate a water main extension to provide the necessary service to the property, including any fire suppression that the fire official has asked for. Sanitary sewage is anticipated to be collected at the rear of the site into a single septic system. So that'll be from the church, the Sexton House, and the parsonage. The total volume, based on the number of seats and the sizes of those 2 accessory dwellings, is under the 2,000 gallons per day threshold at the DEP, so it is a local health department matter. We will seek approval from the health department for the septic system as a condition of approval if the board grants it. In terms of stormwater, the site today generally slopes, from the front half goes east, and then from the back half goes north. We have to keep these drainage patterns as is required by stormwater management rules. But by doing so, and while we're improving the property, we have to meet our quantity and quality reductions in the standard for groundwater recharge. So we're going to achieve this by employing 3 surface infiltration basins throughout the site. You'll see a front basin right off of the street. That's intended to mitigate additional runoff from the county road widening. So it collects water from the widened road it'll mitigate and reduce, and then there is an overflow back into the county right-of-way. The middle basin is intended, which you see right here, is intended to collect runoff from the roof, most of the driveway, and the parking lot. And then the rear basin is intended, which is all the way back here in the corner, is intended to mitigate runoff from the pole barn shed and the 2 accessory residential structures, and of course that private drive. In terms of refuse, we are proposing a 10 by 20 foot masonry refuse enclosure immediately behind the church. It's tough to see at this scale, but it's right there at the corner of the parking lot, southeast corner. This location is out of sight from the right-of-way and most of our neighbors. It's in close proximity to the main building, which was their desire, and the applicant feels that the size of that enclosure is enough and adequate for the current and future needs. In terms of lighting, we're proposing a series of lights throughout the property. So starting at the main driveway, we have a series of light poles, pole-mounted lights, I should say, and 1 building-mounted light on the west side of the church to illuminate the driveway into the property. In the parking lot, we have more pole-mounted lights and then 1 building-mounted light, which is actually a new addition as a result of the board professionals' comments. There's a small entrance in this, tucked away in this corner by the mechanical equipment. We've added another light above that doorway, just where there was a little bit of a dark spot. Further back, and this is another new change, we didn't have any lighting in this private, I'll call it the private drive area where the accessory residential structures are. In our revision, that didn't make it in time, but you'll see, the board will see this ultimately. We've added 2 acorn-style fixtures at the bases of each of these driveways, and the goal here is to maintain the function of these areas as the single-family residential, bit private. We do want to mark that road with whether it's striping or signage or both as a private road, so no access to everybody. And to maintain this residential setting, we're proposing these acorn fixtures that are, very typical of what you would see at the base of any single-family driveway in a single-family zone. In terms of landscaping, and the applicant has Bryce Bennett, who's a licensed landscape architect. He provided the existing conditions, calculations, and the proposed landscape design. From a general point of view, we are seeking to provide a substantial amount of planting to achieve this project. You can see the amount of trees. Tough to see at this scale, but we do provide the buffer plantings from the road all the way to the back, and even in the wooded area as needed and as it can fit on both sides of the property. We do have street trees across the frontage. We're keeping them outside the site triangle, and we do have trees throughout the site and in the parking areas. Each building has foundation plantings, and on behalf of the applicant, we're happy to work with the board's planner and certified tree expert to clarify any review comments they may have as a condition of approval. Again, the intent here is to fully meet those buffer requirements, therefore, the buffer planting requirements, I should say, which again would keep this application as a permitted conditional use, fully compliant conditional use. In terms of signage, we are proposing a ground sign, and there's a detail in our plan set that's unchanged at the front entrance driveway to the property. The sign is intended to be fully compliant with the ordinance, and we'll have foundation plantings as well. In terms of waivers, so one of the waivers that we are seeking respectfully is the environmental impact statement waiver. So we're seeking a waiver from the necessity of providing this environmental impact statement, as our expectation is that the environmental impacts of the development will be minimal. Another hot off the presses letter we received from the Environmental Commission was that they had no objection or no further comment about the application. That was the first time we've heard from them. That furthers what I'm about to say, is that the subject property is partially developed and cleared, as you could see in the initial existing conditions aerial. We're seeking to expand that clearing as shown. It's not the entirety of the property. We are maintaining that woods in the back to accommodate the new church and its accessories. In our office's review of available mapping, the site is not located within any environmentally constrained land use areas. So no flood hazard areas, no riparian zones, no floodways, no freshwater wetlands areas, associated transition areas, or even mapped threatened and endangered species habitat. We are not located within the Pinelands area. It's actually right across the street from us, conveniently, but not as conveniently as one would hope. As part of the project and in conversations with the county, we're widening the county right-of-way physically with the pavement. The county, and we don't disagree, has asked, because the Pinelands boundary is unclear on the map, that they consider the right-of-way part of the Pinelands area. So we are going to seek approval from the Pinelands Commission to allow for that right-of-way work, which would ultimately be a condition of approval in front of this board. Mr. Hawk, would you like me to go into the traffic, or since we have Mr. Ray, what would you like to do? Sure. So we do have a series of design waivers, and some of these I've hit as I've just kind of opened here, but what I'll do is I'll go through them point by point.
Sorry,
so it's clear.
before you continue, could we just ask a simple question?
Sure.
The left, the property to your left, the right, I understand, is not a residential use. I believe it's a church. But to the left, that's a single-family dwelling currently?
From what we've seen, just from inspection of aerials and in person, there's some sort of, it looks like a lot of the buildings here look like single-family. That appears to me like it was, or at one point a single-family, but there is some sort of beyond single-family residential activity going on there. So it was our position that it's not strictly single-family. Hence, the plans were developed accordingly.
Is it used as residential currently?
We don't know. There's work trucks there.
Again, you do need a 50-foot buffer on the current ordinance as a conditional use standard if you're next to residential. Again, I understand the new ordinance would make that into a C variance on the size lot, which would definitely make it a lot easier. It would
Right.
remove that whole, actually, it would remove that whole requirement completely. But, on the current ordinance at the time of filing, that would be a issue if it's a residential use.
So you'd have two choices. You could either move those two buildings in the back over 25 feet, which doesn't look difficult, and the driveway would have to be, the bend in the driveway would have to be moved over 25 feet. You'd have that option, or pull it, refile with the new ordinance that would not cause you those issues. So those are things that, we can't decide for you, but we're pointing those things out.
I have to look at it.
But they're coming back anyway.
Just giving a little thought to that buffer, one second.
Do you understand and agree?
I understand the ordinance, and if it's a residential
Right
use,
now, it says 25 feet.
50
feet, you've got 25,
correct.
to a residential structure. The new ordinance would be a C variance, you wouldn't have that issue. So you could pull, refile with the new ordinance, and you wouldn't have to move these structures. It's just, it's
The use,
technical discussion that you have to decide, we can't decide.
of course, of course. Now, the use of that property to the west, though, is it's the applicant's burden to prove if it's not a residential structure? Would that be correct?
It's listed under the tax
How
map.
about our professionals? That's your
Mr.
opinion,
Peters, what do you
not
think?
mine.
If it looks like a, Doug,
Oh, my first question would be, what's it taxed as?
So I'm looking
Tax
on
residentially,
Zillow, it looks
mixed
like
use?
residential, yeah. But again,
But it's,
If I can, since I live around the corner, what was there, it's a dilapidated bungalow, the guy had boats there for years, while you would bring a boat 35 miles inland, but they were eventually cut up and, they're gone. In my impression, driving by, it's an unoccupied residential structure. So the quick solve, just to skinny this up, is the Sexton's house and the Parsonage house would be the easy move if the applicant was willing. You slide those over 25 feet, that concern dissipates. The question is in the driveway, I don't have a good set of plans in front of me. You would need to, if you agree to bring that driveway closer to the building structure. And don't quote me because I didn't get all the finite details, but I believe that that wing was going to be a future addition that faces on the west side.
And again, Mr. Hawk, this is, sorry.
Not quite, it's the fellowship hall, that's initial, but.
Oh, it's addition, okay, so, forgive me.
It was going to be phases, correct?
Excuse me?
Phases?
That's part of the initial phase,
Okay,
that'll be.
so that's fine. So my question to you as the planner and the engineer, do you have enough between that structure and the driveway to bend it and to gain that 25 feet? And if so, that would negate the third leg of this concern. We move on.
Yeah, so on behalf of the applicant, we can take the two structures in the back beyond the 50
It's an easy
feet.
lift.
And then the driveway, we do have room, and if the adjustments need to be made to that fellowship hall, we can do that.
Okay, so without adjustments to the fellowship hall, and I know he's consulting, the attorney's consulting with Mr. Palzer. The question I would ask once they're done convening is, would the applicant put it on record that you'd be willing to make those three adjustments?
You know, I think we're willing to make those adjustments. I just want to confirm with Pat that, you know, we have the room, but I think the applicant's willing to do that,
So
absolutely.
your testimony is you'd make those three adjustments?
Yes.
Which would negate those concerns with the 50 feet? That's your testimony?
That's correct, because
And
obviously.
usually the time application rule is protecting the applicant.
This
I'm
is a little
sorry,
backwards,
over here
isn't
it's
it?
the other way. You know, the township decided to be more welcoming to religious institutions, so.
Absolutely, and you're
Try to
right.
help.
To withdraw it and start over would
Thank you.
just delay them, so we're trying to keep it
And
going.
The
that's all.
revised plans are going to encompass these new changes.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
All right, so with that change, I guess we'll continue on with the other technical, we have some more design waivers?
We have design waivers and.
Smaller stuff.
Yes, and I may have hit on a few of these in direct testimony, but I'm just going to go through and enumerate them. Subsection 244, I might have the reference wrong here, -197I2, no area shall be used for parking unless it's large enough to provide for at least 3 contiguous stalls. Immediately behind the building, we have where our ADA spaces are. They're actually broken up by the main pedestrian entrance into the structure. So we have actually 2 spaces in that area. We're requesting that waiver just based on the design and layout of the building and the site. The minimum access driveway width needs to be 18 feet for one-way traffic and 24 feet for those carrying two-way traffic. And this is in relation to the driveway in the back towards the 2 accessory structures. It was our testimony that we'll add signage and/or striping or both to restrict this to being a private road only, therefore allowing the 18 feet to, in our opinion, to be sufficient here for two-way access if needed for these structures. Parking lots that have a capacity of more than 50 vehicles, no stalls shall utilize the required entrance and exit drives or major circulation drives as parking access aisles. Again, this is a waiver. We feel, and actually this is now further the point of the board about the 50-foot buffer, is we're limited in width here. We're obviously far deeper than wider. In order for us to provide a circulation drive independent of the parking, takes up a lot more area, takes up a lot more impervious coverage. On a use like this, where it is congregants coming to scheduled times of whatever the service may be, we feel this is an appropriate request as opposed to maybe some other commercial use. In terms of the next one, 244-196A, loading. We're not proposing any loading here. It was actually noted in Mr. Klee's letter as well. Even though we exceed the minimum gross floor area for a use that would require, a non-residential use that require loading, we feel that loading is not required due to the use, due to the nature of services and the like. Any deliveries can be made behind the building without, in our opinion, interrupting circulation substantially. So therefore, we're requesting that waiver. 244-203A, sidewalks and curbing shall be required along all street frontages as a condition of any development in front of the planning board. We are not proposing any sidewalk along West Veterans. We are proposing a limited curb in accordance with what the county will require as a minimum. Applicant seeks relief from this because this section of the road does not have consistency with curb and sidewalk. Applicant's willing to provide a payment in lieu to the pedestrian safety fund if the board grants that design waiver. 244-197K, I would say that we are not seeking that design waiver, and I just want to bring that out there is that, and I said this earlier, that the applicant will, and his licensed landscape architect will work with the board professionals to ensure that we meet the landscaping requirements. I know one of the things that was pointed out was an average of 3 shrubs per landscape island, or per curbed island, and we're happy to provide that. 244-188D, a 6-foot shade tree and utility easement are required adjacent and parallel to West Veterans Boulevard. We've requested a waiver. We're still seeking this waiver, and the reason is the county is requiring an 11.5-foot dedication along the entire frontage. So we feel the easement is not necessary in this location. We are proposing the shade trees, which will be tied to the site plan approval if the board grants it, and we don't have any utilities that will be proposed beyond that right-of-way dedication. So, you know, although the ordinance requires that, I don't think it would have any functionality on this property. 244-197J1F, this is about minimum lighting levels and foot candles within access drives. This is notably for what's in the rear of the private drive. And I think with the revised plans, we are not reaching that half a foot candle in every one spot, but we are proposing those acorn lights that, again, will be like a, you know, for you driving home trying to find your driveway kind of thing. Just illuminated enough for safety, and that's it, but still keep things private. We think that's an appropriate request. I mentioned our justifications, or our proposed justifications for the environmental impact statement waiver. We are seeking a temporary waiver for cut-fill calculations. We'll provide those once the final design is settled upon with Mr. Klee, and we'll be happy to provide those as a condition of approval. Outside agency approvals, we know we need approval from the MUA. We request a temporary waiver, and we'll seek that as a condition of approval. Mr. Klee identified the need for additional soil borings, which we agree with. We have what was done was a preliminary investigation to confirm where we could possibly site stormwater management facilities. In accordance with the state manual, we have to provide a certain number of borings within the areas that are final in design, and then any adjustments will be made if those borings yield different results. We'll provide stormwater system profiles as a condition of approval, again, a temporary waiver, and then Pineland certificate of filing, temporary waiver for now, but another outside agency will seek approval from.
So I think that basically completes this direct. The board, any questions? My plan would be to bring up Mr. Polzer from the church to fill in some more operational details and then dovetail into our planner after that. Just want to give the board
Sure,
an
Mr.
idea where we're
Bresci.
going.
I have one question, sir.
Sure.
You brought up your septic field based on this phase 1. I don't know what your phase 2 is, but you said the congregation would be a lot larger on phase 2. Does this field still meet the requirements for it then, or you have to make adjustments for that septic field at that point?
We feel this will meet it. It's for the full build-out. We have, this is the septic field back here. We feel it'll still stay under that threshold. In the event that it doesn't negate us from having a septic field. It just, what it does is I don't want to say burden, but it does burden the applicant with more extensive soils testing and then a state permit for a TWA permit to get a larger septic field approved. So,
Okay, that's okay.
yeah, so either way, we'll have to go for it, but and our office won't be handling that septic design. He has a separate septic engineer, but based on initial conversations, we feel that this will work locally with the health department.
Thank you. Let's just talk about parking for a second.
Sure.
Sure. What's the current calculation you use for parking? How many?
Yeah, so it is, let me go to, it's my initial set, which is what the board only has.
Thank you, thank you.
Because I changed it a little bit. I jumped the gun, unfortunately. So just bear with me, Mr. Chair. Okay, so the standard at 244-197N1, for a church use, it's 1 space per 20 inches of bench. So we came up with the, that equates to 43 spaces required. We have an EV reduction of 10%, so we're saying that there's 38 spaces required. We're proposing 101.
Got it. So I see over here, total occupants is 205 men, 205 women. 410.
You see that on the architectural plans?
Architectural plans, correct.
That's the total, if I'm speaking out of turn, I believe it's the fire rating, like the occupancy load of the building, right?
Talking about bathrooms, how many?
I think it's like
plumbing
total.
fixtures.
Yeah, total occupancy. The parking standard in the ordinance is based on the number of, well, it's not the number of seats, the length of seats, which really equates to the number of chairs that are available in the sanctuary. And that becomes I'm going to speculate that the reason that ordinance is in there is because that is the heaviest use within the building. So at any one time, if there is a service, that's where the most people would visit the site.
Because I believe the ordinance says like either 1 per 50 square feet of main sanctuary space.
Yes,
or
it there.
gives different calculations.
I believe that is.
Again, you're good either way. I just want to.
I think we're way over, right?
No, not way over. You're you're a little bit over the 1 per 50.
Still over.
I just see over here in your.
So, Mr. Chair, and I know this is, I believe, in the new ordinance, which is not exactly applicable, but it's 1.5 spaces per 100 square feet of sanctuary area for a sanctuary of this size.
Correct. So that's where I wanted. That's really where I wanted to go.
Right.
The problem is that the new ordinance calculates other space as well. Meaning, any other area is going to be calculated also for additional parking. The old ordinance is either 1 per 50 or 1 per 4 occupants, I believe. I'm looking over here in your chart, it says 1.5 per 100. That's taken from the new or the old?
That's the new ordinance? The
Got it.
1.5 per 100, based on the size of the sanctuary.
Now, any of the other uses on site, the parsonage, et cetera, are those going to trigger any additional parking requirements?
I think they provide their own parking.
To answer your question, yes, they do, and Mr. Hawk said they do have their own parking. So there is sufficient driveway length, and I'm not even counting the north-south spurs, it's really what goes east-west. There's garage area, and then there's outside of the garage, and driveway area that can accommodate an excess of vehicles for what would normally be required of a home that size on private property.
I'm just asking you just for numbers, meaning if it's does it use regular RSIS standards?
Yeah, we could apply the RSIS standards. I don't have the bedroom counts immediately at my disposal, but we're well. So 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, we well exceed the RSIS standards for both, if not double, more than double, just in the back there.
Meaning, so there will be additional parking in the back by the parsonage?
Yeah, there's excess, even with the stipulated change of moving those buildings forward, there's still extra driveway, and it's 18 feet wide. So you can actually fit 2 wide per ordinance, and then however deep.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, so the parking standards weren't the new ones, they were the old ones? Or,
That's our position, yes.
okay.
I'm sorry, so just to clarify, how many seats are going to be in the main congregation area?
150 at initial, and then up to 299.
Up to 290?
299.
299, perfect, okay. All right, so I believe our ordinance says 1 per 4 seats, just to clarify. It says if there's no individual seats, then it's 1 per 20 inches. So it's
And I
290.
believe they're.
Again, you're good, I'm just.
No, I believe that,
Don't worry.
well, I'm going to say that the chairs are not enumerated on the architectural plans, but I believe they look like pews. So we're using the inch standard, but I think they are.
They're
yes.
pews.
Yes,
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Anybody else? Sure.
I'd just like to commend you on one of the most concise, well-presented applications I think we've all seen in a long time, regardless of outcome.
Thank you.
Quick question. You said the septic system goes in the back. That's for all 3 buildings?
Yes, and a hair unusual, because it's a long run from the church.
Not
It was
just that.
something we've kicked around a lot. And I will say, I'm not going to be the septic engineer, but as from the site perspective, we played around with options. There's different setbacks, but yes, we do have enough pitch based on the 7:9A septic code to get back there. I'm not worried about the homes, it's really the church and making sure we have enough
Yeah, they might make you pump that, that's a long distance. But my question is, you said it's a 2,000 square foot field?
No, 2,000 gallons per day is the local threshold.
Per day?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to put on the record what the square footage is because it's not calculated
Okay, good. I
fully.
thought you said 2,000 square feet. You have 15 toilets and 6 bedrooms and all these rooms.
That would be a problem.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Unless there's any other questions of Matt, I can bring up our operations.
Thank
witness.
you. Yeah, we do try to end at 10:30, so we'll keep it very concise for you.
We'll keep it quick, I
You know,
promise.
you were waiting a long time, you
Very
look like you're ready to go, so.
Certainly. I'd like to, if we could have Mark Palzer sworn in, please.
Sure. Please raise your right hand. Let's swear him in. Doesn't work. Thank you for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you present is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name, spell your last, and your credentials or affiliation.
My name is Mark Palzer. Last name spelled Palzer. No official credentials this way. I'm retired Major General from the United States Army.
Thank you for your service. Okay. Just your affiliation to the applicant. Are you the applicant? Do you represent?
I'm the business manager and the church council chair, or president.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So Mark, just to cut to the chase, I'm going to ask you to describe to the board the same question I had when I first looked at this. What's a sexton house and what's a parsonage?
Very simple. Parsonage will have the pastor, and the intention here is to make it we have a 3-bedroom house planned so that it will entice a pastor to come with his family and live in the community. And that's the sole purpose of it, just for the pastor to reside in. Sexton's house will be for the person who does the maintenance and does the majority of the liturgical administration. So presently, we have at our place down in Lakewood, we do have a parsonage with the pastor in that, and we have the sexton's house with our organist / sexton in that. So we would plan on moving them right up here.
And the purpose of the additional space is to encourage, you said somebody younger with a family to really reside there and be there full-time for you, correct?
Exactly.
And the providing of housing is really part of their compensation and one of the benefits of taking that job.
Exactly. We didn't want that to be something that we would have to deal with in terms of monetarily on a monthly basis. We felt it'd be easier to have a house there for them right from the get-go and let them continue to work right from there. It's an enticing thing to be able to give them something like that.
And again, these structures will be restricted to that type of use that's accessory and connected to it. You're not going to put this on Airbnb, right?
No, it's just for that.
All right. And obviously, we'd accept any reasonable condition that ties the two together, because that is the purpose here.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think, other than that, there's how many employees in the church on a regular basis? Only a handful, right?
It's only the pastor and the sexton. Currently, we have a part-time person who doesn't live there, just visits like 4 hours a week, and that's the administrative secretary. As the congregation grows, we may get to max of like 2 administrators, but that's probably the max of it. That's the most we've ever had.
All right. That's all I have for Mr. Palzer at this point.
Thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about the classrooms, what they're going to be used for?
Sunday school is the big pressure for it. The reason we need multiple is even if the size is small, we still want to segregate the younger ones from the older ones, especially the ones that are going for confirmation and the very young ones. So that's the primary purpose of it.
Follow-up question to the chair's question. When did the services primarily happen, and when did these ancillary groups primarily meet? Days of week, time of day, that type of thing?
So what you'll get Sunday mornings and a little bit in the afternoon. We do have a Sunday evening, much smaller service that goes on there. And then we will have, during the week, if we do have anything, it would be in the evening, generally speaking. And they're not that set. Right now, we have a couple services in the evening, very small groups, like 20 or less. And usually it's like a youth group or something like that that'll meet.
And most of those don't start until about 6:30 at night?
Usually about 7, actually.
7 o'clock at
yeah.
night, okay. So Monday through Friday during typical business hours, there's not a lot going on?
not much at
Or
all.
during rush hour, as we call it, in the
Yeah,
morning.
anytime you got regular traffic going through Jackson, because I live in Jackson also, anytime you have that, there's not going to be any of our stuff going on. Currently, I don't foresee that either, so.
Thank you. Is there just back to the classrooms, is there any other time besides for a Sunday?
For the use of the classrooms? Only in the event that, so there are occasions where we have some local smaller congregations that don't have a church yet, and they're building themselves up, and they're usually under 20, and they might utilize a classroom for services. And that's,
No, that's okay. Meaning, are you okay restricting the use to weekends only and not during the week?
no, I'm not okay with that. But I'm okay with restricting it to a very limited number of people. But the classrooms, and we're not looking at, for instance, if I want to do a catechism class or, confirmation class on a Wednesday night, I got to be able to have a classroom. I'm not going to do that in the sanctuary.
Right, no, perfect. Are you okay, let's say, not non-school hours? Just some sort of language, just so.
Well, but that's exactly it. Non-school hours is 7 o'clock on. That's when they would hold a confirmation class.
Meaning it could only be, meaning, I just want to make sure it's
Oh,
not going to be
you
used
saying
as
it
a
might-
school. I want it to be used for what you're saying it's going to be used for,
Yeah,
not
like,
as a
like
school.
after 4 PM, after 5 PM.
You could use it
so-
any day after 4 p.m., meaning to restrict the use during school hours. That way, there's a school looking to rent.
I'm okay restricting it to after school hours on a regular basis. But if there's a one-off type of event, I want to be able to do that. But
Yeah, we're not
but-
looking to nitpick.
But like, I'm not going to set up a thing and say, okay, starting at 3 o'clock every day from 3 to 5, we're going to have, 50 kids in here for these 2 classrooms from now until the end of time. I'm not going to, we have no desire to do that.
Yeah, no, we never try to restrict the one-off. There's
Mr.
always gonna be
Hawk?
one-offs.
The goal is not to start a school. That's really what they're trying to ask you. You're
And
not
again, you could
planning
start
to
a
start
school-
a school.
Oh, no, we have no intention to start a
That's the
school.
goal.
And again, you
Yeah.
could start a school in the
If you
LC
want.
zone, but you would have to come back, that's all.
Yeah,
That's all we
and
want.
and that's exactly right, and that's exactly how our church grew previously, which was, we didn't have it, and then they decided to start a nursery school. They came back, and then they built another building. Trust me, if we wanted to start a nursery school, we'd have to come back.
Right, we just want to make sure that, we have the classrooms anyway, let's just start a nursery school, we want some sort of language. to
Yeah,
protect
that's
it.
not our
Part of the
intention.
language, that's all we're.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that would absolutely require them to come back, absolutely.
So can you propose, Mr. Hawk, maybe you could propose some language that will work with your client? Just
Certainly.
I think we're all on the same page.
I think so.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions?
No, just, the applicant has the benefit of enjoying the building for religious purposes, unrestricted, under the First Amendment. I do understand that, we are concerned about operating a school beyond that. How the applicant utilizes that building for that purpose should not be discussed here.
100%.
Just no bait and switch.
Yep. No bait and switch. We don't put a cross on a building and then say it's going to do something else.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Peters, you had a question? Any other questions from the board? Okay, I believe you're going to have to come back anyway with some revised plans for us.
Yes, we do. I just, while we have our planner here, I promise you'll be very quick. Mr. Peters did ask to tie in these residential uses to make sure we don't have a use variance here, so I just wanted to get that on the record. It'll be very brief if I can.
Thank you.
This is Allison Coffin of James Higgins Associates. If I can have her sworn, and she'll put her credentials
Thank
on
you.
the record.
Thank you for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony, information, questions, or comments you present will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please state your name, spell your last, and your credentials, please.
Allison Coffin, C-O-F-F-I-N. I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I'm certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners.
We accept your credentials. Thank you.
Thank you.
Allison, you had an opportunity.
It's
to
late
listen-
at night.
You had an opportunity to listen to the testimony tonight by the previous witnesses, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and could you give us your professional planning opinion as to whether or not the sexton and the parsonage is in fact an accessory use, customary, incidental, and subordinate to the principal church use?
Sure, I had a whole thing prepared, but if the board is satisfied with me saying yes, they are? Yes, they are. In this instance, the housing is tied solely to agents of the church. The clergy and the sexton is the groundskeeper and maintenance person. These are traditional offices of a church. It's traditional for these offices to be provided housing. In this case, they are customary and traditional accessory uses, and therefore permitted under your ordinance.
And you see this in many zones and in many towns and other religious uses, not only in this area, but in other areas, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Again, Mr. Chair, we want to keep it brief. We want to get that testimony on the record. If you have any questions of Allison, we welcome them.
Good, concise, precise, thank you.
Very quick.
Like the rest of the application, thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. So,
Thank you for coming in prepared.
absolutely. So I guess at this point,
Mr. Ray, you're always quick.
Wait, who is that guy in the audience? I've never seen him before.
we have him here. I leave it to the board whether you want to keep going.
Yeah, bring him up.
All right. Okay.
Listen, municipal land use treats religious uses, with
How many school
extra
buses do we have?
Exactly.
For almost 4 hours. I want to get done if I can.
Mr. Ray, thank you for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or from the testimony, information, questions, or comments you present will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name, spell your last, and your credentials.
John Ray, REA, a professional engineer with McDonough and Ray Associates, traffic engineering firm based in Manasquan, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Mr. Ray, could you provide the board your professional opinion as to the traffic impact of this particular development on the surrounding area?
Sure. I was hired a little bit late in the game for this, a little bit after Thanksgiving, but I have had the opportunity to go out and do peak hour traffic counts on Sunday morning at the Jackson Justice Complex, which is just to the west of just to the east of this property on West Veterans Highway. We did Sunday morning traffic counts from 9 to 12 noon. And we did a level of service calculation for the site driveway, assuming all 299 seats in the main sanctuary were occupied on a Sunday morning, and the services ran from 10 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock. And we calculated the level of service for the site driveway for the 2033 design year, 10 years in the future. That's what the Ocean County Planning Board requires of us. And we have a B, very good B level of service for traffic entering and exiting the driveway during those Sunday morning peak hours. And that's it.
Thank you.
Wait, did you say you retired?
Retired?
Did you just say you retired?
No.
Oh, okay, I was going to say, you're not. Oh, okay, all right. I was going to say, you're not allowed to do that.
We're not letting him retire,
Yeah,
absolutely not.
No, you're not allowed to do that. If we got to be here, you got to be here.
No, I'll be around for a while, I hope.
Okay.
Thank you.
I offer from the board for questions. If none,
Thank you. We will open up to public in a moment. I do believe that we have to come back anyway with a bit of revised plans.
We do.
So we have the clean record. Just a reminder, just come in if you could have at least 10 days before.
Just do a little bit sooner than 10
The
days.
plans with the
Missed it by
50-foot
that much,
buffering
just a
on
little
the
bit.
left side, and you could have that in before, 10 days prior to the 8th.
that's fine. Will the 8th be actual hearing or is it scheduling? I know the board has some.
We'll do it for actual hearing.
Okay,
It is a reorg meeting. We could fit you in for an actual hearing.
we'll be ready.
It should be,
You guys are going to be quick,
yeah,
concise.
you guys are so great that it should be quick.
So with the holidays coming and the 8th being, that would have to be this, maybe by Friday or between the holidays next week. If the board would be okay with it, if we could just provide a new layout plan with some conceptual grading and then updated landscaping, rather than a full plan set. I just think, I'm going to be honest, I don't have the time to.
No,
It's all we need.
Well, not
well,
me. I
again,
don't
it's
have
not
the
really a
time.
question for
Our
us.
team doesn't have the time.
Mr. Klee, are you okay with that?
I'm hoping this
I'll
week,
give you-
Mr. Klee.
He's going to fully engineer it during resolution compliance, if he wants to know if that's okay. I'll give it to you by Friday and fully engineer it during reso compliance, I believe. That's what you're stating?
You're working on Christmas, right, Mr. Clay?
Okay. But we're going to put it to the 8th for actual continuing the hearing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
So it,
Merry Christmas.
Doug, just remember, for the right reasons, not to build a warehouse. This is for the
Mr.
right
Clee, we're going to try to get those emailed and delivered on Friday.
Do it tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to go. No one needs sleep.
Okay,
The only-
so,
I got
wait,
one- I got
no,
one request, that you come back with as clear and representation like you did today. Like it was said, you do not, we don't get applications like that all the time.
Mr. Chair,
You
the
were so-
secretary has something to add
yeah,
here,
yeah,
I
sure,
think.
I'm just turning to Lauren.
Absolutely.
It is a holiday
100%.
for
We'll do
Laura
that.
also. Thank you.
I'll make a note as I leave here. Yep.
Putting you at the bottom.
We have to read.
I think we only have one so far, so you're good.
Yeah. Well, he'll be the only application.
Probably.
Thank you for all your consideration on this. We appreciate
No,
it.
we have the MUA, just the administrative approval. Okay, so at this point, I'd just like to open it up to the public. If anybody waited until almost, almost 11 o'clock at night, please come forward.
See nobody coming forward, I move to close the public session.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So, let me read it. Block 11801, Lot 80, Emmanuel Lutheran Church will be moved to the January 8th, 2024 meeting.
No no further notice, Mr. Chairman?
Required. And may I please have a motion to close?
So moved.
Oh, wait,
Wait, I'm
wait,
sorry,
wait.
motion to move it to the 8th, I'm sorry.
Wait, I wanted to say something first. Before we end tonight, I just wanted to say thank you to our two secretaries for a wonderful year of excellent work. We appreciate it. We appreciate the support of all our professionals, but our secretaries, they're special.
Thank you. May I please have I concur with that. May I, 100%, thank you for always saying the right thing at the right time. May I please have a motion to move it to the 8th?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to close.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.